My husband's coworker said they're entitled to his secret hot sauce recipe, and things got weird fast. So, this all started as one of those small, harmless work things that snowballs into a full-blown drama before you even know what's happening. My husband, Ethan, has always been the grill guy. Every family BBQ, every office picnic, every random Sunday, we're the house that smells like smoked ribs and chili peppers, the secret weapon behind it all. Ethan's homemade hot sauce. He's been perfecting it for over 10 years. It's not just a mix of peppers and vinegar. It's like his art. He roasts specific peppers himself, grows 2 of them in pots on the deck, uses this honey that his dad's friend makes in Vermont, and even ferments part of it for a week. He guards the recipe like it's the nuclear launch codes. Most people respect that. They taste it, rave about it, and move on. But then came Bryce. Bryce is one of Ethan's co-workers. They work at a tech company in marketing, and Bryce is one of those overly confident, everything is a business opportunity guys. He's charming, kind of funny, but a little too entitled for his own good. The first time Bryce tried the sauce at the company's summer cookout, he went crazy for it. Said it was restaurant-level amazing. Ethan laughed and thanked him, not thinking anything of it. But then Bryce asked for the recipe. Ethan politely said no, explaining it was his personal recipe, something he's been working on for years. Bryce laughed it off and said, "Come on, man. Sharing is caring." Ethan just smiled and brushed it off. But that was the start of something I didn't realize would turn into a bigger issue. Over the next few weeks, Bryce started mentioning the sauce at work a lot, to the point where other coworkers began jokingly calling Ethan the hot sauce guy. Ethan didn't mind that part. It was harmless fun. But then Bryce took it up a notch. He started showing up at our house. At first, it was innocent. He dropped by with a bottle of whiskey saying, "Thought I'd bring something to go with that famous sauce." Ethan, being the friendly guy he is, invited him in. They grilled some wings, had a few drinks, and had a decent time. I remember thinking Bryce was just a bit overexcited, but as time went on, his visits got uncomfortable. One night, I came home from work to find Bryce in our kitchen, hovering over the stove while Ethan was making a new batch. Bryce had his phone out, recording. Ethan looked tense, and when I asked what was going on, Bryce grinned and said, "Just documenting genius in action." Ethan immediately told him to stop recording. Bryce laughed it off again, saying he was just joking, but you could feel the air go cold. After that, Ethan got distant about making sauce when Bryce was around. He'd make it late at night or when I was home, just to make sure nobody else was getting too curious. But Bryce didn't let up. He started sending Ethan business proposals, no joke. He emailed him a mock-up brand name, some logo ideas, and a basic pricing plan for bottling the sauce. Ethan politely told him he wasn't interested in selling it, that it was just a personal hobby. Bryce didn't take it well. A few days later, Ethan came home visibly upset. Apparently during a team lunch, Bryce went off about how stingy Ethan was being. He said that if Ethan wasn't going to use the recipe commercially, he might as well let someone else do it. Another coworker tried to step in, but Bryce was relentless. He even said, "It's not like you invented hot sauce. Dude, you just mixed some peppers and honey. You're acting like it's proprietary." Ethan told me that's when he finally snapped a bit. He told Bryce to back off and that if he brought it up again, he'd go to HR. Bryce laughed and said, "HR over a sauce? Okay, big man." It didn't stop there. A week later, we found out Bryce had tried to recreate the recipe himself, and then started handing out bottles at work with a label that said, "Inspired by Ethan's original." That was the final straw. Ethan went straight to HR with emails, screenshots, and even the stupid mock-up Bryce had sent him. HR took it seriously because Bryce had been using Ethan's name in the workplace to promote something without permission. He got written up and his hot sauce hustle got shut down real quick. Of course, that didn't make things any less awkward. Ethan said Bryce started giving him the cold shoulder, making little passive-aggressive comments like, "Guess some people don't appreciate ambition." A few months passed, and things calmed down. Until the company's winter party, everyone was having fun, and somehow, someone brought up food again. Bryce, clearly tipsy, said loudly, "I still think we were robbed of that sauce recipe." People laughed, but then he looked straight at me and said, "You could have talked him into sharing it, right? I bet you know what's in it." I just smiled and said, "I do, but lucky for him I know how to keep secrets." He rolled his eyes, muttered something like, "What a waste," and stumbled off. The next morning, Ethan got an apology email from HR again. Apparently, A few co-workers had reported Bryce's comments at the party. That was the end of it. Bryce was let go a few weeks later for unrelated reasons, but everyone kind of knew. Now Ethan only makes the sauce for close friends and family. We even joke about it sometimes. Last Thanksgiving, my brother jokingly asked, "So when are you selling that sauce, Gordon Ramsay?" Ethan just smirked and said, "When people learn to mind their own recipes. Every time I smell it simmering in the kitchen now, it feels like home, like something we earned through patience, effort, and a little bit of drama." It's funny. Though, Ethan recently started experimenting with a new flavor. When I asked what he'd call it, he said, "Maybe entitlement. It'll taste great but burn a little too long." That man, I swear. Still, to this day, we keep that recipe written in a tiny notebook in our kitchen drawer, locked in a tin box. And every time I see Ethan pull it out, I can't help but smile, because in a weird way, that whole hot sauce fiasco reminded both of us of something bigger. You can share your passion, your effort, your time, but not everyone deserves the recipe for what makes you. A few months passed after the whole Bryce incident, and for a while, life finally felt normal again. Ethan was back to his easygoing self, cooking on weekends, working his usual hours, coming home with stories about random office banter instead of workplace tension. But peace, as we've learned, doesn't last long when someone like Bryce is involved. One Friday evening, Ethan came home later than usual. He wasn't angry, but he looked unsettled. He set down his keys, grabbed a beer, and just stared at it for a minute before saying, "You're not going to believe who I ran into today." My stomach immediately dropped. It was Bryce. Apparently, Ethan's company was at a regional tech networking event. Think booths, startup pitches, free coffee, and too many people in blazers pretending to care about synergy. Bryce had been there, representing a small company that, ironically, specialized in artisan condiments and sauces. I remember just blinking at Ethan and saying, "You've got to be kidding me." "Nope, not kidding." Ethan said Bryce spotted him across the room and made a beeline straight over. At first, he acted like nothing bad had ever happened, greeted Ethan with a big smile, slapped him on the back, and started chatting about the old days. Ethan kept it polite but distant. Then Bryce started talking about his new venture, saying he'd found investors and had a promising product line. Ethan said he didn't think much of it, until Bryce handed him a small sample bottle. It was a bright red-orange sauce with a clean label that read, "Heatwave Honey," by Bryce Coleman. When Ethan told me that, my jaw literally dropped. Honey. The same signature ingredient that made Ethan's hot sauce so unique. Ethan said he tried to stay calm, but his hands were shaking when he looked at the label. The ingredients list wasn't identical to his recipe, but it was very similar. Bryce had clearly tried to reverse engineer it. He even had the nerve to say, "You were my inspiration, man. I've been perfecting my own version. Figured if you didn't want to go public with it, I would." Ethan told him flat out that it was unethical and potentially illegal to take someone else's idea and sell it without permission. Bryce just shrugged and said, "You can't copyright flavor." Bro, that line stuck with Ethan. When he got home that night, he didn't say much at first. He just sat at the table, turning the little bottle over and over in his hands. He wasn't angry in the explosive sense. He was just hurt, like something personal had been taken from him. Even if technically it wasn't stolen in the legal sense, he finally said, "I spent 10 years figuring out that balance of sweet and heat, and he's out there making money off it like it's nothing." We spent the weekend going back and forth over what to do. Technically, Bryce hadn't stolen an exact formula, but he had used Ethan's name and recipe as a base. Even after HR issues and being fired, Ethan wasn't the type to jump straight to legal action, but I could tell he was seriously considering it. I suggested we at least check with a lawyer who specialized in intellectual property. Monday came, and we did just that. Ethan sent a few emails and got connected with a small firm downtown. The attorney was honest with us. It would be an uphill battle to prove theft. But depending on how Bryce had marketed the sauce, especially if he'd mentioned Ethan or their workplace, there might be grounds for a cease and desist. Ethan sent the lawyer photos of the bottle, the ingredient list, and even the mock-up logos Bryce had once emailed him while still at the company. The lawyer said, "There's definitely a pattern here. At minimum, we can send a formal notice to make him back off." So, we did. A few weeks later, the letter went out, and within a few days, all hell broke loose. Bryce sent Ethan a long, angry message, calling him petty, jealous, and afraid of competition. He claimed Ethan was trying to ruin his chance at making something of himself. He even said, "I respected you enough to admit where the idea came from. You could have joined me, but you let pride get in the way." Ethan didn't respond, but Bryce didn't stop. He started posting vague things on LinkedIn and Instagram. Little passive-aggressive posts like, "Some people can't handle seeing others succeed with ideas they were too lazy to pursue." We knew who it was aimed at. Eventually, one of Ethan's former co-workers, who still followed Bryce online, sent us screenshots of Bryce's website, and right there, in the description for his heatwave honey, it said, "Inspired by a friend's backyard recipe, perfected for everyone." That was the line that made Ethan finally lose his patience. Our lawyer sent a second, much firmer letter. This one explicitly referencing Bryce's previous HR records, the prior cease and desist, and the use of any friend's recipe in his marketing language. That finally did it. Bryce pulled the site down a few days later. The social media pages went dark. We thought that was the end of it, and thankfully for the most part it was. But the whole situation changed Ethan a bit. Not in a bad way exactly. He just became more protective, more private. He still makes his hot sauce, but now he does it in smaller batches, labels them by hand, and only gives them to family last Christmas. He even made a special bottle for me. It had a black and gold label that said, "Recipe for Peace." He told me, "I don't ever want someone else to make me feel like what I love doing isn't mine. This sauce isn't about money. It's about time, effort, and heart, and that right there. That's why I love the man." Funny enough, a few weeks ago, his company had another cookout. People still ask about the legendary sauce, and Ethan brought a tiny jar, just enough for a few wings. Everyone lit up when they tasted it. Even his new boss asked, "So when are you going to bottle this up for the world?" Ethan smiled and said, "The world's not ready for it. Besides, some recipes are meant to stay close to home, and I swear." In that moment I realized it was never about hot sauce. It was about pride, creativity, and standing up for yourself when someone tries to take what you built. Because sometimes the secret ingredient isn't just honey or spice. It's boundaries. It's been almost 3 years since the whole Bryce fiasco, and for a while, it felt like that chapter of our lives had finally closed. Ethan and I moved out of our cramped apartment and bought a small home just outside of Portland. It has a garden, a shed, and a little kitchen space that Ethan jokingly calls his laboratory. He's been making new versions of his hot sauce, some fruit-based, some smoky, even one that's sweet with cinnamon and habanero. It became his hobby again, not a sore spot. Life felt calm, almost simple. We'd built this quiet rhythm. Morning coffee, his work, my freelancing. Evenings spent experimenting with recipes or binging a show. Everything was steady. Then, out of nowhere, Bryce reappeared. It started one random Thursday morning. Ethan was scrolling on his phone during breakfast when he suddenly froze. I looked up from my coffee and asked what was wrong. He turned the screen toward me, and there it was. A TikTok video. The title read, "This small batch hot sauce changed my life." It was a food influencer reviewing something called Fire Hive. The packaging looked very familiar. Red-orange label, honeycomb pattern in the corner. Even the slogan, "Sweet burn, smooth finish," was nearly identical to the tagline Ethan used to joke about years ago. When the camera panned to the maker's logo, my heart dropped. Fire Hive sauces by Bryce Coleman. The comments were full of praise. People saying how original it was, how authentic it tasted, how it stood out from all the other craft sauces. Someone even commented, "This tastes like someone actually cared about the recipe." The irony was unbearable. Ethan didn't say anything at first. He just scrolled through the comments, quiet, unreadable. After a while he put his phone down and said, "He did it again." I expected him to get angry, but he didn't. Not this time. He looked tired, maybe even disappointed. But there wasn't rage. Just this deep, calm resignation. We watched Bryce's other videos, interviews, podcasts, local food features. Apparently Fire Hive had taken off. He had investors, a website, merch, the works, and get this, he had an entire section on his site dedicated to our story, where he talked about starting from a friend's kitchen and turning an idea into a business. The friend part was clearly referring to Ethan. I could see the conflict on Ethan's face. He wanted to move on, to let it go. But there was that ache again. The ache of watching someone profit off the very thing that came from his hands. I asked him what he wanted to do. He said, "Nothing. For now, he's not using my name, and I'm not about to chase him for the rest of my life." but I won't sit around and let him rewrite history. That night, Ethan started writing. He made a Reddit post, just a quiet one in a small cooking community. No names, no brands, just a heartfelt story about creating something you love, sharing it in good faith, and watching someone else take it for their own gain. He didn't complain, didn't accuse, he just told the truth. And somehow that post blew up. Tens of thousands of people read it, chefs, hobbyists, food entrepreneurs, all sharing their own experiences of having their work copied or stolen. It turned into this massive, unexpected discussion about creative ownership, boundaries, and passion. Ethan didn't even mention the name Bryce once, but people knew. The internet has a way of putting pieces together. Within a few days, someone linked Bryce's brand to old photos, and people realized the similarities. Then the comments under Bryce's videos started shifting. At first, they were still supportive, but then, people started asking questions. Hey, isn't this story kinda similar to that Reddit post? Did you really come up with this recipe yourself? Seems weirdly specific. Bryce tried to do damage control. He even made a short video saying he'd worked on this sauce for years, and never intended to copy anyone. But once people saw the old evidence, his past HR issue, screenshots, even the inspired by a friend tagline, things started unraveling. The internet can be ruthless, but in this case it felt justified. His brand's credibility tanked. His investor pulled out after the controversy spread on LinkedIn and foodie forums. Eventually, his website went down, and the Firehive social pages went silent. For a while, Ethan didn't say much about it. He just watched from the sidelines, quiet. Then one night, he said something I'll never forget. I didn't want revenge, I just wanted peace. But maybe sometimes peace comes when the truth finally speaks louder than pride. That was the last time Bryce's name ever came up between us. Now, Ethan's been teaching cooking classes at a local community center. Not professionally, just small Saturday sessions for kids and teens who want to learn how to cook real food. He teaches them his philosophy, patience, experimentation, and respect for what you make. Every now and then, he still gets asked if he'll ever sell his hot sauce. He just smiles and says, "Nah, some flavors aren't meant to be bottled, they're meant to be shared." And that's the full circle moment I didn't realize we were waiting for. Because the real victory wasn't getting even with Bryce. It was watching Ethan find joy in his creation again, without bitterness, without fear. He made something honest. And that's something no one can ever steal. Stories number 2. They made me drive through a blizzard for team morale, and I crashed my car. I've been sitting in my rental car's front seat for over an hour, trying to decide if I should cry or quit my job. Probably both. I work for a mid-sized marketing company based out of St. Louis. We handle regional campaigns for small businesses and sometimes run community engagement events. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. I'm a project coordinator, and I actually used to like my job. I've been there for almost 4 years, and I always tried to be the yes person, the one who stepped up when no one else wanted to. Until last weekend, the story starts with an email from Ben, our regional director. The subject line was "Quick turnaround event, need all hands." I opened it to find out they wanted me to help run a promotional setup for one of our clients, a local hardware store chain, in a tiny town called Lakeford, about 4 hours north. The problem? A blizzard warning had been issued that same morning. I replied right away, saying that travel advisories were in effect and that I didn't feel safe driving that far alone in those conditions. Ben's response came within 10 minutes. "We really need you on this, Emma. The client is expecting a full team presence. It's not optional. Bundle up and drive slow." That was it. No offer to delay, no concern, just not optional. I called him, hoping he'd change his mind once I explained that the roads were already icing over. He didn't even let me finish. "You'll be fine," he said, laughing a little. "You've driven in snow before. Just leave early." I tried going to Kara, my immediate manager. She agreed the timing was bad, but told me her hands were tied. "Ben said this event has to happen," she said. "If you don't go, it'll reflect poorly on you. Reflect poorly." That's the phrase that stuck in my head as I packed my car with a folding table, a box of brochures, and 2 big banners with our logo. Reflect poorly. Because God forbid I value my life over a promotional booth for Johnson's Home Supply in a town no one's heard of. I left at 6 a.m. on Friday. It was already snowing. That heavy, wet kind that sticks to your windshield no matter how fast your wipers go. I passed maybe 3 cars in the first hour. The further north I went, the worse it got. By the time I hit Highway 19, visibility was down to about 20 feet. The wind sounded like it was trying to peel my car apart. Around 9:30, I texted Ben a photo from a gas station, showing how bad it was. His reply: "Appreciate your commitment, Emma, don't overthink it. See you Monday." I wish I could say I turned around, but I didn't. I told myself it wasn't that much further, that I just needed to get through it and everything would be fine. I was halfway there when it happened. The road curved along a frozen field, and the snow had covered the center lines. I must have drifted a few inches too far to the right because suddenly, my car hit something, maybe ice, maybe a snowdrift, and I lost control. The car spun. I remember the blur of white, the sound of metal scraping against something hard, and then a sharp, horrible jolt as I slammed into a guardrail. Everything went still. The airbag went off. I sat there, heart pounding, the taste of copper in my mouth. I was lucky. My seatbelt held. My car, not so much. The front end was crushed. One tire was completely shredded, and my phone flew into the passenger footwell. I just remember this numb silence. Snow falling outside, my breath fogging up the window, and the realization that no one knew exactly where I was. I eventually found my phone, but it had only 8% battery left. I called 911, and it took them over an hour to reach me. The state trooper who showed up, Officer Miller, told me I was the third crash he'd seen in 2 miles. He looked at me like I was crazy when I said I'd been sent there for work. "In this weather? They made you drive in this?" he asked. They towed my car to a local shop, and I got a ride to a motel from the tow driver, Randy, who looked like he'd been pulling people out of ditches all morning. I called Ben again once I was settled, still shaking. He didn't pick up. I left a voicemail explaining what happened. Then I called Kara. Her first question wasn't, "Are you okay?" It was, "Oh my God, did the client event still happen?" I couldn't even answer her. I just said, "I crashed my car, Kara." She went quiet, then said, "Oh, well, I'll tell Ben." No one called me back that night. Or the next morning my insurance covered part of the repairs. But the rental car was on me. My deductible is $1,000, which is basically my rent. When I emailed HR asking about company liability since it was a required trip, they sent back a short message saying travel risks are assumed by the employee unless otherwise specified in writing. In other words, tough luck. That Monday I finally got back to the office. My car was still at the shop, so I had to borrow one from my dad when I walked in. Ben was chatting in the break room, completely casual. I said, "Hey, I wanted to talk about what happened Friday." He didn't even look up from his coffee. "Yeah, I heard about that. Glad you're okay. We'll make sure to expense the mileage once your car's repaired." Mileage? That was all he said. Mileage. Later that afternoon, I overheard him joking with another manager saying, "Emma really went the extra mile for Johnson's." Literally. They both laughed. That's when something in me just snapped. I went back to my desk, opened my email, and typed up a resignation letter, 2 sentences. "I will not continue to work for a company that values deadlines over employee safety." Effective immediately. I printed it, dropped it on Ben's desk, and walked out. I don't think he believed I was serious until he saw my empty cubicle the next morning. That was 3 weeks ago. I've been interviewing since then, and I already have a few solid leads, but honestly, I don't even care if I have to take a pay cut, because I can't shake the image of that highway. The sound of my car hitting the guardrail, and the realization that I could have died because someone wanted a good photo op for their client. Every time I drive now, even short distances, I catch myself gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. My friends keep saying I should report the company to OSHA or post about it on LinkedIn, but I don't even want to give them that attention. They'll keep running their community events and acting like heroes while someone else risks their safety to keep them looking good. All I know is this: I learned the hard way that no paycheck, no team spirit, no boss's approval is worth your life, and if your job ever tries to convince you otherwise, walk away before you're forced to learn it the way I did. It's been almost 2 months since I left that job, and honestly, I've gone through every emotion you can imagine. Anger, guilt, relief, even a weird sense of grief. When you give years of your life to a company, it's hard to just walk away and not feel like you lost something, even when they didn't deserve your loyalty. The first few weeks after I quit were rough. My car was still in the shop in Lakeford, and I had to rely on my dad's old pickup to get around every time I drove. I found myself checking the weather app 5 times a day, scanning the sky for clouds, gripping the steering wheel like it might betray me. I wasn't in a life-threatening crash, not really. But emotionally, I kind of was. My friends, especially Marissa and Josh, have been absolute rocks through this. Marissa made me stay at her place for a few days after the accident because she didn't trust me to be alone. She was the one who first said, Emma, this isn't just about your car or your job. This was about them treating you like you're disposable. And she was right. Josh helped me go through all my documentation for HR, just in case I decided to take legal action. We dug through old emails, Slack messages, expense reports, everything, and it turns out there was an entire thread between Ben and upper management basically acknowledging that the blizzard warning was an inconvenience, but that client satisfaction outweighed travel hesitation. That sentence made my blood boil. Josh's brother is a lawyer, and when he saw those emails, he told me I might have a legitimate claim under unsafe working conditions, especially since I'd raised concerns before traveling. He said I'd probably have to fight for months, maybe years, but that I'd have a solid case if I wanted to pursue it. For a while, I was all in. I started drafting a statement, gathering my pay stubs, thinking about what it would be like to sit in front of a courtroom and tell a judge that a grown man basically coerced me into risking my life for a corporate photo op. But then reality hit. Lawsuits take energy, and I didn't have much left. I was waking up in the middle of the night from dreams of snow swirling around my windshield. That sound of the crash echoing in my ears. I was exhausted from being angry, so I decided to let it go, for now at least. Then something wild happened, about 3 weeks ago. I got a message on LinkedIn from a woman named Lauren, who used to work in our company's accounting department. She said she'd heard about what happened to me. Apparently word had gotten around, and that Ben was now under investigation. Not because of me, but because of another employee he'd pressured into driving overnight for a client meeting. That person had slid off the road and totaled their car too. Thankfully, they were okay, but it sparked a lot of questions internally. Lauren said HR finally started taking complaints seriously. Several employees came forward with their own stories about being pushed past reasonable limits. She said Kara, my old manager, quietly resigned 2 weeks ago, and Ben was placed on administrative leave pending review. I didn't even know how to react when I read that. I sat there staring at the message for a full minute before I started crying. It wasn't happy crying. It was that heavy, messy kind of relief that comes when you realize you weren't crazy, that someone finally saw what you saw. Since then, things have actually been looking up for me. I started a new job last week with a nonprofit that focuses on road safety awareness. The irony isn't lost on me. The organization runs campaigns about distracted driving, winter safety, and protecting delivery workers. All the things I wish my old company cared about. My boss now, Eric, is the complete opposite of Ben. On my second day, it started snowing, and he literally walked around telling everyone to leave early before the roads got bad. I laughed when he came to my desk and said, "Go home before the weather turns. Nothing we do here is worth your safety." It almost made me tear up. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear those words from someone in charge. As for my car, I finally got it back last week. The shop did an amazing job repairing it, though it still has this faint rattle when I drive above 60 mph. It's a reminder, I guess. A little echo of everything that happened. The funny thing is, I thought leaving my job would tank my career, but it's been the opposite. I've gotten so many messages from old colleagues saying they admired me for standing up for myself. A few even told me that my story gave them the push they needed to set boundaries at work too. And that's probably the best outcome I could have asked for. I don't want revenge anymore. I don't want lawsuits or headlines. I just want peace. And maybe for the people still stuck under people like Ben to find their way out too. Sometimes I still think about that morning. The silence after the crash. The way the world looked so white and still. I remember how small I felt sitting there, waiting for help, wondering if I'd done something wrong by obeying orders. But now I know better. I wasn't weak for going. I was conditioned to believe that loyalty meant obedience. And I'm not weak for walking away either. If anything, that crash woke me up. It made me realize that survival, literal and emotional, has to come before a paycheck, before team spirit, before anything else. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally driving towards something better. It's been almost 6 months since the accident, and it feels like an entire lifetime has passed. Sometimes I look back on that night and wonder how close I really came to dying. Not just on that icy road, but in that job that slowly drained everything out of me. After I started working for the nonprofit, things shifted in ways I didn't expect. I found myself speaking at small community events about workplace safety, even though public speaking used to terrify me. The first time I stood in front of a crowd, my hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped my notes. But then I told them what happened. The blizzard, the crash, the emails where my old manager called it an inconvenience. you could have heard a pin drop. Afterward, people came up to me sharing their own stories. Delivery drivers forced to work in floods, nurses punished for calling out during hurricanes, retail workers who had to open stores when tornado warnings were active. That's when I realized how common this problem is. It's not just one bad boss or one careless company. It's a culture of push through it. The idea that professionalism means ignoring danger and discomfort. And that realization hit me hard. A journalist from a local paper reached out after one of those talks and asked to interview me for a story about unsafe corporate practices during severe weather. I hesitated at first because I didn't want to relive it all, but I agreed on the condition that they wouldn't name my former company. The article came out a month later, and it went viral. Not because of me, but because so many people related to it. Hundreds of comments, all saying the same thing. I thought I was the only one. About 2 weeks after that, I got an email from Kara, my old manager. I hadn't heard from her since she resigned, and honestly, I didn't expect to. Her message was long and surprisingly sincere. She apologized for not standing up for me when I told her I didn't feel safe driving. She admitted she'd been scared of Ben, scared of losing her job, scared of looking weak. She said she'd started therapy because she realized how much of her self-worth had been tied up in being the perfect manager, the one who never said no. I didn't know how to respond right away. I read her message 3 times before finally writing back. Thank you for saying that. I forgive you. I hope you forgive yourself too. It wasn't about letting her off the hook. It was about letting myself move on. Holding on to anger was like carrying the crash around in my chest. I needed to let it go to make space for peace. Then, a few weeks later, I heard from Lauren again, the woman from accounting who'd told me about the investigation. She said the company officially terminated Ben. The internal report cited multiple incidents of endangering employees and ignoring safety protocols. Apparently, several clients even pulled out of contracts after learning what had happened. Karma, it seems, has its own schedule. But it always shows up eventually. I won't lie. When I heard he was fired, I didn't feel joy. I just felt done, closure maybe, like the chapter finally ended. Since then, my life has settled into something peaceful, something I didn't think I'd find for a long time. My boyfriend, Matt, and I moved into a small place just outside the city. He's been my anchor through all of this, patient, grounded, quietly supportive in a way that doesn't smother. Every time it snows now, he jokes that I should call in trauma leave. He means it kindly, but he also makes sure the driveway's salted and my tires are good. I even bought myself a new car. Well, new to me, a 2021 Subaru Outback. Used but solid. The guy at the dealership laughed when I told him I specifically wanted something with good karma and great traction. I think I've earned that. The nonprofit recently promoted me to project coordinator, and I've been working on a campaign with the Department of Transportation. We're designing a series of PSAs about employer accountability during extreme weather. The first one just got approved. It shows a woman behind the wheel, snow falling thick around her. A phone buzzing on the passenger seat with a message from her boss. We really need you to make this event happen. Then it cuts to black with the words, no job is worth your life. Every time I see the storyboard, I get chills because that was me. And now, maybe someone out there will see it and decide to stay home. And maybe that'll save them. As for my old co-workers, I've stayed in touch with a few. Josh and Marissa are both doing well. Josh ended up leaving the company too. He got a new job at a startup that actually listens to its employees. He told me he sometimes uses my story as an example in team meetings about why you never ignore a safety concern. I told him he's free to milk my trauma for good if it helps someone. I haven't heard from anyone else from the company, and honestly, I don't need to. That part of my life feels like it belongs to a different person. The one who thought loyalty meant silence. Who thought she had to prove herself by pushing through fear. Now when I drive and it starts to snow, I don't feel dread anymore. I feel cautious, sure, but also proud. Because I know I survived something. Not just a crash, but a mindset that could have destroyed me in slower, quieter ways. If there's one thing this entire experience taught me, it's that strength isn't about enduring everything people throw at you. It's about knowing when to say no, when to step away, and when to protect yourself, even if it disappoints others. I used to think walking away made me weak. Now I know it made me free. And every time I see that first flake of snow hit my windshield, I take a deep breath and whisper to myself, not this time. Then I turn around and go home. Stories number 3. I didn't force my son to go to a birthday party because of the host's dogs. So, here's what happened. I, 34F, have a son, Ethan, 7, who's a sweet, kind kid but has a massive fear of dogs. I'm not exaggerating when I say he panics if one even walks toward him. This isn't just a nervous around dogs kind of thing. It's a deep, full-body fear that goes back a few years. When Ethan was 4, a neighbor's German shepherd jumped the fence and knocked him down while barking in his face. It didn't bite him, but that moment stuck. Ever since then, he gets shaky, cries, and clings to me if a dog is nearby. We've tried therapy, exposure sessions, even spending time with a friend's gentle golden retriever named Daisy. But it always ends the same. His breathing speeds up, and he just shuts down. So, a few weeks ago, Ethan got invited to a classmate's birthday party. The classmate, Ben, is a sweet kid. They're not best friends, but they sit together in school sometimes. The invitation said it was at Ben's house with food, games, and a special surprise. Ethan was excited at first, until I remembered something. Ben's family has 2 big dogs. I've seen them before at pickup. They're these energetic Labradors that always run around the front yard. When I mentioned it to Ethan, he immediately said, "I don't want to go if the dogs are there." I told him. Maybe the dogs would be in another room. But he shook his head and said no. I could tell from his face. He wasn't being bratty. He was genuinely terrified. I texted Ben's mom, Jessica, who I've met a few times at school events. I explained the situation politely, saying Ethan wanted to come but was scared of dogs. I asked if she might be willing to keep the dogs in another part of the house during the party. She replied quickly, but kind of curtly, "Oh, we can't really lock them up. They're part of the family, and they get anxious if we isolate them. But don't worry, they're super friendly." I thanked her anyway and told her Ethan wouldn't be attending then. She read it and didn't reply. The next day, I ran into her at drop-off. She smiled politely but seemed a bit off. Then later that afternoon, one of the other moms, Kelly, who's friendly with Jessica, pulled me aside and said, "Hey, just so you know, Jessica mentioned you're being overprotective about the dog thing. She said it's sad Ethan's missing out because you're not helping him get over it." That kind of stung. I'm not trying to shelter him from life. But he's 7, not 17. Forcing him into a panic attack at a birthday party doesn't seem like helping. The party came and went, and I guess some parents noticed Ethan wasn't there. One mom texted me photos from the party. Ben's dogs were literally running around in all of them. Kids were playing with them, feeding them snacks, petting them. I can only imagine how Ethan would have reacted if he'd gone when I showed Ethan the pictures, because I didn't want to hide it from him. He just said, "That's okay, Mom. I don't like dogs, but I hope Ben had fun." That broke my heart a little. He wasn't jealous or bitter, just calm about it. Fast forward a few days. Ben told Ethan at school that he wished he'd come and that he could have helped him get used to the dogs. Apparently Jessica overheard this. She's one of those moms who's always volunteering at school. And she told me later, "You know, you should have just brought him. He can't avoid dogs forever. You're reinforcing the fear," I told her. Respectfully, it's not about avoidance. It's about comfort. He's a child, and this is something we're working on gradually. She sighed and said, "Well, my dogs would have never hurt him." I just smiled and walked away. The funny part? A week later, I got a message from another parent saying their kid had gotten nipped by one of the dogs when it grabbed a cupcake from his hand. It wasn't serious, but it made me realize I definitely made the right call. I didn't respond to Jessica after that, but she's been cold toward me at school since. I honestly don't care. But I do feel bad that Ethan missed out on something social. I keep wondering if I should have handled it differently. Still, every time I think about how pale and shaky Ethan gets when a dog gets too close, I know I did what was right. Kids have fears. They outgrow some and carry others. But forcing them into traumatic situations just to make adults feel better isn't the answer. A few weeks passed after that birthday party, and I honestly thought the whole thing had blown over. Ethan seemed fine. He was back to his usual routine: school, soccer practice, weekend movie nights. But then one afternoon, he came home quieter than usual. I asked how his day went, and he hesitated before saying, "Ben doesn't want to sit with me anymore." I asked why, and he mumbled, "His mom said I don't like dogs, so I'm weird." My stomach dropped. It wasn't hard to guess who that message came from. I tried to stay calm. But I was angry. Not just because of what was said, but because it was unfair to Ethan. He's 7. He's not being difficult. He's scared. Adults should know better than to put kids in situations like that. That night, I texted Jessica, not to start a fight but to clear things up. I wrote, "Hey, I heard something from Ethan that concerned me. He said Ben mentioned you told him Ethan doesn't like dogs and that it's weird. I just want to make sure we're setting a good example for the kids. I understand this might have come up casually, but I'd appreciate it if we could keep things kind between them." She read it almost immediately and replied, "I didn't mean anything by it. I just told Ben that Ethan's scared of dogs and that it's sad, because dogs are wonderful. If he interpreted that wrong, that's not on me." The tone rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't reply. It wasn't worth escalating, but I did make a mental note to keep my distance. Later that week, Ethan's teacher, Ms. Lang, called me. She's one of those teachers who genuinely cares about her students. She told me she'd noticed some tension between Ethan and a few of the kids during recess, mostly teasing about him being scared of animals. Nothing too serious yet, but she wanted to flag it early. I appreciated that she called. I told her about the birthday incident, and she completely understood. She said, "Don't worry, I'll talk to the class about kindness and how everyone has different comfort levels." I could have hugged her through the phone. Meanwhile, I started looking for ways to help Ethan get more comfortable around animals without pressure. I found a local animal therapy program that specializes in kids with phobias. The first session was simple. He didn't even have to touch the dog, just sit in the same room. He was nervous but did okay. The second time, he got close enough to feed the dog a treat with a stick. By the third session, he smiled a little. That was huge progress for him, but of course life can't stay calm forever. About a month after the party, the school had a community barbecue event. Families brought food, kids ran around, there were games. It was one of those all-day outdoor things. I went with Ethan, just trying to make it a fun day for him. We were near the playground when I saw Jessica walking toward us with her dogs. Of course, both of them, leashed but still excited, tails wagging, pulling her along. Ethan immediately froze. His hand gripped mine so tight it hurt. I gently said, "Let's move over here," steering him toward the food area. But Jessica spotted us. "Oh hey, you made it," she said, smiling like nothing had happened. "See, my dogs are fine, they're so gentle." Ethan hid behind me. One of the dogs barked once, and that was it. He started crying. Not loud, just that trembling kind of cry where you can feel how scared he is. Jessica said, "Oh come on, they're just saying hello." I lost my patience a bit. I said, "Jessica, please, he's terrified. You're not helping." People were looking now. She seemed embarrassed and muttered, "Well, he's never going to learn if you keep coddling him." That was my breaking point, I told her. You don't get to talk about my parenting when you can't even respect a simple boundary. Then I took Ethan's hand and walked away. We left the event early. I felt bad for him. He kept apologizing, saying, "I didn't mean to cry, Mom." I told him he had nothing to be sorry for. I reminded him that fear isn't a flaw. It's just something he's learning to handle. The next morning, I got a text from Kelly again, the mutual friend mom, saying, "I don't think Jessica realized how bad it was. She told me you snapped at her in front of everyone." I told her, if she had listened the first 5 times, it wouldn't have happened. Since then, things have been quiet, I think. Word got around because a few other parents who used to chat with Jessica have started talking to me more, maybe realizing I wasn't overreacting after all. Ethan, thankfully, has been doing better. The therapy is slow, but he's proud of himself. Last week, he told me he wants to try petting Daisy again someday. Not soon, but someday. And you know what? That's enough for me. It's been about 6 months since that whole birthday party and barbecue mess, and I can finally say things have settled into something close to normal again. Ethan's doing better than I ever expected, though it's been a long, steady climb instead of some miracle turnaround. He still doesn't love dogs, but he's no longer terrified. The animal therapy has really helped. The woman who runs it, Melissa, is patient in a way I wish every adult was with kids. She never pushes, just encourages. The last session, she introduced him to a golden retriever named Buddy, a calm, older dog who just kind of lays there like a rug. Ethan actually reached out and petted him, just once. and he immediately pulled his hand back like he'd touched something electric. But then he smiled. "Mom," he whispered. His fur's soft. I almost cried. After that, we celebrated with ice cream. He told me he wants to get a robot dog someday, which I'll count as progress. As for Jessica, we haven't really spoken since that day at the school barbecue. I've seen her in passing, school pickup, grocery store, things like that. But she usually avoids eye contact. I think she finally realized she crossed a line. I don't need an apology at this point. I just need peace. One small thing that meant a lot. A few weeks ago, Ms. Lang, his teacher, sent home a note saying she'd nominated Ethan for a Kindness Star Award. Apparently, a classmate dropped his lunch tray, and while the other kids laughed, Ethan helped clean it up and told them, "It's okay. Everyone makes mistakes." That made my whole week. I think that moment summed up what this entire experience taught both of us. Compassion isn't just about being nice. It's about understanding that people have limits, fears, and vulnerabilities. Ethan learned that, and so did I. On my end, I've been more intentional about who I spend time with. There's a core group of parents now, people like Laura and Tina, who don't gossip or judge. We hang out sometimes after drop-off for coffee, and it's a breath of fresh air compared to the drama earlier this year. A few of them even asked for the contact info for the therapy program when they heard how much it helped Ethan, turns out. A couple of their kids have anxiety around certain animals too, but they were too embarrassed to talk about it before. It's funny how one uncomfortable situation can ripple out into something that helps others. Ethan's dad, Mark, who lives a few towns over, came to visit last month. We've been co-parenting pretty peacefully since our split, but I hadn't told him everything that happened until then. He was surprised, then furious. Mostly at the other adults for making a kid feel small, he said. "Good for you for standing your ground." That meant a lot. We even had a conversation about maybe getting Ethan a pet one day. Not a dog. At least not yet, but maybe a fish or a hamster. Something small and manageable. Ethan overheard us and said, "If we get a hamster, I'll name him Burrito." So that's probably happening. Looking back, I realize how many times I second-guessed myself just for advocating for my child. I kept wondering if I was being overprotective, or if people would think I was making a big deal out of nothing. But you know what? Protecting your kid's comfort and mental health isn't overreacting. It's parenting. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone in a similar situation, it's this: you don't have to justify your boundaries, especially when they're about your kid's safety or peace of mind. You can be polite, you can be patient, but at the end of the day, it's okay to walk away when someone won't respect that. Ethan still has some bad dreams every now and then about barking or chasing, but they're less frequent. When he wakes up scared, I remind him he's safe, and that he's getting stronger every day. He usually smiles and says, "I know, Mom, I'm brave now," and he really is, so no. I don't regret skipping that birthday party, or leaving the barbecue, or drawing a hard line with someone who wouldn't listen. I used to think parenting was about teaching your kid how to fit into the world, but now I think it's just as much about teaching the world how to treat your kid. Stories number 4. New office is full of dogs, and I'm allergic. When I landed my new job, I was ecstatic. It felt like a fresh start after a tough few years. Burnout, a bad breakup, and moving back into my tiny apartment after the pandemic wrecked my finances. So when this marketing agency in Seattle offered me a position with great pay, remote flexibility, and a cool modern vibe, I thought my luck had finally turned around. On my first day, I walked into this sleek downtown office with floor-to-ceiling windows, a stocked snack bar, and that faint smell of coffee and ambition. Everyone seemed friendly, casual, laid back. I was nervous but excited. Then I noticed the first dog, a golden retriever, sprawled out across the lobby rug like he owned the place. His name was Winston, according to the little sign on the wall that said, "Office Pups of the Month, cute idea," I thought. I even smiled and gave him a little wave before heading to my orientation. By lunchtime, I'd met at least 6 dogs. A corgi in a Christmas sweater in June, a pit mix sleeping under the printer, and a poodle named Muffin sitting in someone's lap during a Zoom call. It was adorable in theory, except for one major problem. I'm allergic to dogs, not like sneeze a little allergic. Like eyes swell up, throat gets itchy, chest feels tight, allergic. At first I tried to play it cool. I didn't want to be that person on their first day who complains about the fun office culture. So I popped a Claritin, smiled through watery eyes, and told myself I'd adjust. But by the end of the week, I was miserable. My nose wouldn't stop running, my skin was breaking out in hives, and I felt foggy all the time. It wasn't sustainable, so on Friday I went to HR. The HR manager, Karen, yes really, was nice but clearly hesitant. She listened, nodded, and said, "Oh yes, we're a dog-friendly office. It's one of our core values, actually. Part of what makes our company special. But I totally understand allergies can be tough." I asked if there was any way I could have a designated dog-free space, or maybe work more remotely. She said she'd look into it and get back to me. A week passed. Nothing changed. I sent a polite follow-up email, explaining how I'd been struggling, and even attached a doctor's note verifying my allergy. Karen replied with, "Thanks for your patience. Emily, unfortunately, most of our employees bring their dogs as part of their routine, so it would be hard to restrict that. We can provide air purifiers in your area, though," I wanted to scream. Air purifiers? Against 8 dogs running around shedding hair like confetti? Still, I tried to make it work. I rearranged my desk, stocked up on allergy meds, and even started eating lunch outside to avoid dander. Then one day, everything went sideways. We had a big client pitch, and I'd stayed late the night before prepping slides. I walked in that morning already exhausted, trying to psych myself up for the presentation. Right before it started, one of my coworkers, Olivia, brought in her new rescue, a massive husky named Ghost. The dog was beautiful but wild. Within minutes, Ghost had jumped onto the couch beside me, tail wagging furiously, brushing against my arm and scattering fur everywhere. I froze, my throat instantly tightened. My skin started itching like fire. I excused myself, rushed to the bathroom, and tried to calm down, but my breathing was getting worse. I ended up using my inhaler twice, splashing cold water on my face, and texting my boyfriend to pick me up. I missed the presentation entirely. That night, I emailed HR again, more firmly this time. I explained that I'd had an allergic reaction at work, and that the current setup was unsafe for me. I also said I didn't want special treatment, just reasonable accommodation. The next day, I got called into a meeting with Karen and my supervisor. Mike tried to be understanding, but it was clear he didn't want to ruffle any feathers. He said things like, "We totally value your contribution, and we don't want to make you uncomfortable," but then followed it up with, "You have to understand, this is a very collaborative, dog-inclusive culture." I asked what that even meant. He said, "It's part of our identity as a company. It's what makes us us." I left the meeting feeling defeated, basically. My health was less important than Winston the Golden Retriever's right to nap by the water cooler. For a while, I just pushed through it, took more meds, wore long sleeves, tried not to cry when my eyes puffed up during meetings, but the exhaustion built up fast. I was getting sick all the time, missing work days and falling behind on projects. Then one afternoon, during a casual lunch meeting, one of the higher-ups joked, "Emily's the only one in the office who doesn't love dogs. Maybe that's why she's always sick." Everyone laughed. I laughed too, but inside it stung. A few days later I snapped. Ghost, the husky, had escaped Olivia's cubicle area again and ran straight into mine, knocking over my coffee and covering my keyboard in fur. I stood up, tears in my eyes, and said, "I can't do this anymore." It got quiet. Everyone just stared. I packed my stuff and left. That night, I updated my resume and started applying elsewhere. 2 weeks later, I got an offer from another agency. Same pay, remote first, and best of all, no dogs. When I gave my notice, Karen seemed shocked. She said, "We really wish you told us how bad it was." I just smiled and said, "I did," walking out of that office for the last time. I passed Winston asleep on the rug, surrounded by people laughing and petting him. I couldn't even be mad anymore. I got it now. The company wasn't a bad place. It just wasn't made for someone like me. Still, it felt like such a waste. I had the skills, the drive, the passion. But all that didn't matter next to a few wagging tails. Now, 6 months later, I work from home. My apartment is quiet, fur-free, and smells like vanilla candles instead of wet dog. I still love animals. I really do. I even dog sit sometimes for friends, with allergy pills ready. But that experience taught me something about boundaries. It's okay to advocate for your health, even when people make you feel guilty for it. It's okay to not fit into every culture. And it's okay to walk away from something that makes you sick, literally or otherwise. Sometimes you don't need to adapt to the environment. Sometimes you just need a new one. It's been about 8 months since I left that dog-filled office, and honestly, I thought that chapter was closed. But somehow, it's come back to haunt me, just in a way I didn't expect. After leaving the agency, I started my new job fully remote. It's been a dream. My allergies are completely under control. I can finally breathe again, literally. And I actually enjoy my work. My boss, Rachel, is supportive. And I've got a small but solid team. It feels like I can finally focus on doing good work without needing an inhaler next to my keyboard. Everything was great. Until last month when my old company reached out. I got an email from Mike, my old supervisor. He said, "Hey Emily, hope you're doing well. We're restructuring our creative department, and I wanted to see if you'd be open to coming back. We've made some big changes you might like." At first, I laughed. There was no way I was going back there, but curiosity got the better of me. So I asked what kind of big changes he meant. Apparently, after I left, 2 other employees also quit over the dog situation. One had a mild allergy, and the other complained about distractions and hygiene issues. One of the dogs had an accident during a client tour. Management finally had to address it. They created dog-free zones, installed gates, and restricted dogs from certain meeting rooms. I'll be honest, a small part of me felt vindicated. For months, I'd been dismissed as the one who hates dogs. But now they were finally seeing that it wasn't just me being difficult. It was a real issue. Mike offered me a raise and said I could work hybrid, mostly from home if I wanted. I actually considered it for a minute. I missed some of my old coworkers, and it felt nice that they finally realized I wasn't the problem. But then I remembered everything. The gaslighting, the lack of support, the way they made me feel like my health was less important than the office pets. I politely declined. I thought that would be the end of it. But apparently word got around. A week later, I got a message on LinkedIn from Olivia, the coworker with the husky. The message started polite enough. "Hey, I heard you were asked to come back, crazy times, huh?" Then it turned into a half apology, half justification. She said she didn't realize how bad it was for me, that she felt bad about the ghost incident, but also that everyone just thought you were being sensitive. She wrote, "Honestly, I think a lot of us were jealous because you got special attention from HR." That one made me stop reading for a moment. Special attention? I'd been begging HR for weeks while trying not to have an allergic breakdown in the bathroom. I responded politely but didn't engage much. I told her I was happy with my new job and wished her the best. Then, last week, something even stranger happened. A new intern at my current company, Melissa, mentioned in a meeting that she used to work at a marketing firm downtown with a ton of dogs. My stomach dropped. I asked which one. And of course, it was my old company. We chatted after the meeting, and she told me the dog culture there had finally toned down after some allergic person made a big deal about it. She didn't realize it was me until halfway through the conversation. Her eyes got wide and she said, "Wait, that was you?" She looked awkward, then said, "Honestly, good for you. It was out of control there." That conversation weirdly made me feel validated again, like maybe I wasn't the crazy one after all. But it also reminded me how easy it is for people to rewrite stories when they're not the ones living through it. At that office, I was the problem, the uptight, dog-hating employee. Outside of it, I'm just someone who stood up for herself. The irony? My current company is considering going pet-friendly next year. During a team meeting, they asked for feedback, and I spoke up. I shared my story, without naming names, and explained what can go wrong if a policy like that isn't managed carefully. My boss thanked me for being honest, and said they'd make sure to have clear allergy accommodations in place. That was the moment I realized how far I'd come a year ago. I was sitting in a bathroom stall fighting to breathe, afraid to speak up because I didn't want to seem difficult. Now, I'm confident enough to share my experience and advocate for boundaries without guilt. Funny enough, I also started volunteering with a local rescue group, not for dogs, but for cats. They're hypoallergenic breeds mostly, and I help with social media and adoption posts. It's my little way of staying connected to animals without putting myself at risk. Sometimes I still think about Winston and Ghost and that ridiculous Office Pups of the Month sign. I can even laugh about it now. That job was a turning point for me. Even if it didn't feel like one at the time, I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean winning in the moment. Sometimes it means planting a seed, one that grows long after you've walked away. Now, when I log in every morning from my quiet little apartment, I light a candle, make my coffee, and smile at the peace around me. No sneezing, no fur, no guilt, just me, breathing easy and doing my job the way I was always meant to. And honestly, that's better than any dog-friendly culture could ever offer. It's been almost a full year since I wrote that last update, and reading it back now, I can't help but smile a little at how much has changed, not just around me, but in me. After I turned down the offer to go back to my old company, I figured that was the end of it. But in typical fashion, life had a few more weird turns to throw my way. A few months ago, I was invited to a local business networking event for marketing professionals. Normally, I hate those things. Small talk, fake smiles, and way too many people bragging about brand synergy. But my new manager, Rachel, basically insisted that I go since our firm was expanding, and she thought I'd be a great representative. So I showed up, name tag on, coffee in hand, trying to look like I wasn't planning my escape route. I was chatting with a small group of people when I heard a voice behind me say, "Emily?" I turned around and there was Mike, my old supervisor. It was honestly surreal. He looked the same, maybe a bit more tired. His hair had gone grayer, and he had that look people get when they've been through a few professional wars. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Hey, didn't expect to see you here." I was polite, said hello, asked how things were going at the agency. He told me they'd had a ton of turnover after the whole dog policy chaos, and now HR had strict guidelines about pets in the workplace. "Honestly," he said with a small laugh, "you were ahead of your time." For the first time, I didn't feel awkward talking to him. I didn't feel the need to defend myself or explain. I just nodded and said, "Yeah." It was a learning experience for everyone. Later that night, after the event, I got a LinkedIn message from him. He apologized, a real apology this time, for not taking my concerns seriously back then. He said, "You were right to stand up for yourself. I should have done better as your manager." I stared at that message for a long time before replying. I told him I appreciated it, and that I hoped things were better now. And that was that. No resentment, no lingering bitterness, just closure. It's funny how much peace can come from being validated years after the fact. But that wasn't the only unexpected twist. Last winter, my company hired a new graphic designer named Jake. Super talented guy, early 30s, kind of shy at first. During lunch one day, we got to talking, and somehow the topic of pets came up. He laughed and said, "I love dogs, but I can't be around them. I'm allergic as hell," I told him. "You are my people." We swapped allergy horror stories, and I shared a bit, in a funny way, about my old office. He just shook his head and said, "Man, people really underestimate what that's like." Fast forward a few months. Jake and I started hanging out after work. Just casual stuff at first. Coffee, trivia nights, weekend hikes. But there was something easy about being around him. No pretending, no walking on eggshells, no explaining myself. Now we're dating. It's still new, but it feels real. He's thoughtful, patient, and actually listens. He teases me for being the girl who took down dog culture, and I tease him for sneezing at cats. It's light, genuine, and drama-free. Exactly what I needed after years of stress and anxiety. And here's the sweetest irony. Jake recently adopted a hypoallergenic poodle mix named Max. We both got tested before he brought him home, and thankfully, I'm not allergic. Max is like a little therapy dog for us both. Calm, quiet, and nothing like the chaos of that old office. Every once in a while, I'll get a message from someone who still works at my old job. Apparently, they have Allergy Awareness Week now. HR even used my old case as a training example for inclusive workspace policies. They didn't name me, but a few coworkers told me everyone knows I was the spark. That used to make me cringe, being that person who stirred the pot. But now, I'm proud of it. I didn't burn a bridge, I built a damn boundary. And it turns out, that's what they needed. Life has slowed down in all the right ways. My remote job gives me freedom. My health is the best it's been in years. And I've surrounded myself with people who get it. Sometimes, when I'm working from home with Max curled up on my lap, I'll glance at the little wooden sign I bought a few months ago. It says, "Peace over approval." That's become my motto. If I could go back and tell my past self anything, it would be this. You weren't difficult. You weren't overreacting. You were just asking to breathe, and sometimes, that's enough of a reason to walk away. Even if it means walking alone for a while. Because eventually you stop feeling like you're suffocating. Not just from allergies, but from people who make you feel small for speaking up. Now I breathe freely, literally and figuratively, and that's something I'll never take for granted again. Stories number 5. I slept with my soon-to-be ex-wife's best friend. And I don't know if I regret it or not, alright? Before anyone jumps down my throat. I know I screwed up. I'm not writing this to defend myself, but because I've been walking around with this knot in my stomach for weeks, and if I don't get it out somewhere, I'm going to explode. My name's Ethan, 34M. My soon-to-be ex-wife is Lindsay, 32F. We've been together for almost 9 years, married for 6. For most of that time, I really did love her, or at least I thought I did. Things started falling apart about a year ago. It wasn't one big explosion, it was slow erosion. We stopped laughing together, stopped touching. We started keeping score about every little thing. Who cooked more, who paid more, who forgot to switch the laundry, who cared more, death by 1,000 tiny resentments. I wanted to fix it. We did therapy. Lindsay would sit there with her arms crossed while the therapist asked her to open up, and she'd say, "I don't know, always I don't know." But then, about 3 months ago, I found out she'd been having what she called an emotional affair with her coworker, a guy named Ryan. She swore nothing physical happened, but they were texting constantly. I saw messages where she said things like, "You make me feel like someone actually listens to me." That broke something in me. She didn't even apologize the way I thought she would. She said, "Well, maybe if you'd listened to me, I wouldn't have needed to talk to someone else." We agreed to separate, and she moved in with her sister temporarily while we sorted out the logistics. We hadn't filed the divorce papers yet, but it was over. Enter Tara. Tara's 31, Lindsay's best friend since college. I always liked Tara. She was loud, funny, and brutally honest in a way that could either be refreshing or annoying. Depending on the day, she'd been part of our friend group for years. When Lindsay and I announced we were separating, Tara was one of the first people to text me, saying she was sorry things ended that way and that I didn't deserve how it went down. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then we started talking more. First about random stuff, then about deeper things. She told me she and Lindsay had drifted apart lately, that she didn't agree with how Lindsay had been treating me. One night, a few weeks after Lindsay moved out, Tara came by to drop off some mail that had been delivered to their old apartment. I offered her a drink, one turned into two, and before I knew it, we were sitting on the couch reminiscing about old times. Then she touched my hand, and I should have stopped it, God. I know I should have stopped it, but I didn't. It just happened, messy, desperate, and full of anger that had nowhere else to go. It wasn't romantic or gentle. It was like two people trying to fill a void the wrong way. The next morning she looked at me and said, "We probably shouldn't tell anyone about this." I agreed. But of course, secrets like that never stay buried. 2 weeks later, Lindsay called me. She wasn't angry. She was eerily calm, she said. "I know about you and Tara." I froze. Apparently, Tara had confessed after Lindsay noticed she'd been acting weird. Lindsay told me, "I didn't think you'd stoop that low. I guess I didn't know you at all." That sentence has been living rent-free in my head ever since. Now Tara and Lindsay aren't speaking. Lindsay told all her mutual friends that I cheated on her, which, technically, I didn't. We were separated. But emotionally? Yeah, it's still betrayal, just in a different shape. The worst part? I don't even know how I feel about Tara now. She keeps texting me, saying she misses me, that what we had meant something to her. I care about her as a person, but the whole thing feels poisoned. I haven't heard from Lindsay in a month, except through our lawyers. She's pushing for a quick divorce, no alimony. Just wants to be done with me entirely, and me. I've been sitting here in the empty apartment, staring at the couch where everything went wrong, wondering how two people who once swore they'd build a life together could end up destroying each other like this. Sometimes I think about that night and feel nothing but guilt. Other times, I think maybe it was inevitable, that Lindsay had already checked out, and I was just finally doing the same thing, in my own ugly way. I don't know if I hate myself for what I did, or if I'm just tired of trying to be the one who always takes the blame. I keep wondering if deep down, I did it because I wanted Lindsay to feel what I felt. The betrayal, the humiliation, the sting of knowing you weren't enough. I don't know if that makes me a monster or just a broken person trying to feel something again. Either way, I can't undo it, and maybe I wouldn't, even if I could, because the truth is, for one night, I felt wanted again. I felt like myself again. And that's the part that scares me the most. It's been about 2 months since I first posted, and things have unraveled in ways I didn't think were possible. When I wrote that post, I thought the worst part was over, that the storm had passed. But honestly, that was just the eye of it. Lindsay found out about Tara, and I thought her calm reaction was just anger buried under control. I wasn't ready for what came after. About a week after she found out, I got served with divorce papers, not through her lawyer, but through a mutual friend. That was her way of saying she didn't even want me to have her contact information anymore. The message was clear. You don't get access to me, not even for closure. I sat on my couch and stared at that envelope for hours before opening it. It was so cold, just business, after everything we'd been through. After 9 years together, it came down to signatures and property lists. The part that hit me hardest wasn't even the divorce itself. It was that she didn't include a note, not even a line of goodbye. It's like she'd erased me. Tara, meanwhile, has been acting like she wants to rewrite our story into some kind of redemption arc. She started showing up more, bringing coffee, talking about wanting to take things slow, maybe see where we could go. But I can't do it. Every time I look at her, I see Lindsay's face when she said, "I guess I didn't know you at all, don't get me wrong." Tara isn't a bad person. She's been surprisingly kind to me through all of this, even when she's clearly falling apart too. But the weight of what happened between us sits like a stain that won't wash out. Every interaction feels off, like no matter how much we talk, it's all under this shadow of something we can't undo. About 3 weeks ago, I got a message from Lindsay's sister, Hannah. She told me that Lindsay was moving to Portland for a new job and didn't plan on coming back. She also told me, in that biting way only a protective sibling can manage, that Lindsay had finally realized what kind of man I was. That one stung, because I don't even know what kind of man I am anymore. Here's the thing. I've been doing a lot of therapy since the post. I started seeing a counselor, Greg, who specializes in relationship recovery and guilt processing. He's been helping me unpack a lot of what led up to all of this. Not just the cheating, but the whole slow collapse that came before it. He told me something that's been echoing in my head ever since. You didn't just cheat on your wife, Ethan. You cheated on the version of yourself that wanted to do better. That hit harder than I expected. He's right. The affair wasn't about revenge or lust. It was about me trying to claw back some control over a life that had spun completely off its axis. I felt humiliated, ignored, and lonely. And instead of facing that pain, I tried to drown it in someone else's arms. The irony? It only made me feel smaller. Tara called me last weekend. She was crying. She said Lindsay had blocked her on everything, that she'd lost half their friend group, and that she didn't think she'd ever forgive herself for what she'd done. I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything, because the truth is, she's not the only one who lost something. I lost my wife, I lost my friends, and I lost the version of me that I actually liked. Greg told me I need to stop trying to fix it and start learning from it. He said, "You can't rebuild a bridge that was never meant to last." So that's where I am right now. Somewhere between acceptance and grief. I signed the divorce papers last week. Lindsay's lawyer confirmed she received them. She didn't send a word back, not a text, not an email, just silence. And I think that's what hurts the most. That silence. It's not the shouting or the arguments or even the betrayal. It's realizing that she's already moved on emotionally, while I'm still stuck replaying every mistake like a loop I can't escape. The apartment feels empty now. The couch, that damn couch, is gone. I got rid of it because I couldn't stand looking at it anymore. I replaced it with a second-hand recliner that doesn't match anything else. But at least it's mine. Sometimes I catch myself scrolling through old photos of Lindsay and me on my phone. There's one from our honeymoon. We're standing in front of a waterfall in Oregon, laughing, both drenched. I look at that photo and think, how did we go from that to this? Tara texted me again last night. She said she's thinking about moving away, starting over somewhere new. I told her I thought that was a good idea. She replied, "You're not mad?" I said, "No, I think we both need a clean slate." And that was it. Maybe someday I'll run into Lindsay again. Maybe in a grocery store or an airport. And we'll nod politely and keep walking. Maybe I'll have found someone new by then. Someone who knows the messy version of me and loves me anyway. Or maybe I'll just keep learning to live with myself. One day at a time. But for now, I'm not the man who cheated. I'm not the man who got cheated on. I'm just a man who messed up. Who's trying to figure out what it means to be better next time. If there even is a next time. It's been a year since I last wrote. And I've read that first post a few times since then. Every time I do, I feel like I'm looking at a stranger. A version of myself trapped inside a snow globe of bad decisions. Swirling guilt and pain that felt endless at the time. But now, it's all settled dust. A lot can change in a year. The divorce finalized 9 months ago. It was clean, no property battles, no drawn-out mediation, just signatures and silence. Lindsay didn't ask for anything, and she didn't show up in person to court. I did. I remember sitting there, waiting for her to walk in, some part of me hoping she'd appear so I could see her one last time. but the door never opened. I walked out of that courthouse with the strangest mix of relief and grief. It wasn't the ending I imagined when we said our vows, but it was still an ending. And sometimes that's the best gift two people can give each other when love turns into resentment. After the divorce, I moved to Asheville, North Carolina, to take a new job with a smaller marketing firm, fresh start, new scenery. My therapist, Greg, said physical distance can sometimes help create emotional distance. And he was right. At first, I hated it. I didn't know anyone, and everything reminded me of what I'd lost. But slowly things shifted. I started going hiking on weekends, joined a local trivia team at a brewery, adopted a dog, a golden retriever named Scout. He's got this dumb, happy energy that fills the quiet moments where guilt used to live. Every once in a while I'd still think about Lindsay, wonder if she ever forgave me, or if I was just a name she deleted and never thought of again. Then one random Thursday, around 6 months ago, I got an email from her. The subject line just said, "No need to reply." It was short. She said she was doing well, that Portland was treating her kindly, and that she'd met someone kind, grounded, and patient. She wrote that she didn't send the email for closure or reconciliation, but to let me know that she no longer hated me. She said, "I don't excuse what you did, but I understand it better now. We both made mistakes. I hope you find peace." I sat there staring at that email for a long time, crying in a way I didn't expect to, not from sadness, but from the quiet relief of knowing she wasn't carrying anger anymore. Because even if we never speak again, at least it doesn't end in hate. I never replied. She asked me not to, but I've reread that message more times than I can count. As for Tara, she did end up moving. She relocated to Denver, and we haven't spoken since she texted me before she left. No dramatic goodbye, no final conversation. Just two people who once made a huge mistake and quietly agreed to never reopen that wound. She posted a picture on Instagram a while back. She's apparently dating someone new, and honestly, she looks happy. I didn't feel anger or jealousy when I saw it, just gratitude that she found her way out of the mess we made. I'm not dating anyone seriously right now. I've gone on a few dates, but every time it starts to feel serious, I pull back. Greg says I'm still rebuilding trust, not in others, but in myself. He's right. I need to trust that I won't repeat old patterns, that I can show up honestly in a relationship without the ghosts of my mistakes whispering in my ear. Work's going well, I got promoted recently, and I'm finally in a place where my life feels stable. Not like I'm constantly waiting for something to go wrong, but the biggest shift isn't external, it's internal. I've learned how to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. I've learned that guilt isn't a punishment, it's a teacher, one that won't shut up until you listen. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't always come in the form of a dramatic reunion. Sometimes it's just the quiet peace of knowing you wouldn't make the same choices again. Last month, I ran into a mutual friend of Lindsay's while visiting my parents. She mentioned that Lindsay's engaged now. For a second, I felt a pang, not of jealousy, but of nostalgia, like looking at an old house you used to live in. Now with new paint and someone else's furniture inside. She deserves that happiness, so do I eventually. There's a kind of calm that comes when you finally stop rewriting the past in your head, trying to make it prettier. When you just accept that you did what you did, and that the only thing left to do is make sure your future self never becomes that person again. I still think about that night sometimes. Not the physical part, but the emotional hurricane that led to it. How angry and empty I felt. How I convinced myself that hurting someone else would somehow fill that void. If I could talk to that version of me now, I'd tell him, sit with the pain. Don't pass it on, but life doesn't give you rewinds, only replays and lessons. And if there's one good thing that came out of all this, it's that I finally understand that being a good man isn't about never making mistakes. It's about owning them, learning from them, and choosing to do better every single day afterward. So yeah, I slept with my soon-to-be ex-wife's best friend. I lost a marriage, I hurt people I loved, and I paid for it. Not in money, not in drama, but in the slow, grueling work of forgiving myself these days. When I take Scout for a walk in the early morning and the air's quiet and clean, I realize something. I'm not the villain of my own story anymore. I'm just a man who fell apart, picked himself up, and decided to walk forward, one careful step at a time. And for the first time in a long, long while, that feels like enough. Stories number 6. Should I ask my math teacher to adopt me? I know that sounds ridiculous. Believe me, even typing that title made me cringe a little. But when you've spent most of your life feeling like nobody truly wants you, sometimes your heart latches onto any hint of real care and calls it home. I'm 17, a senior in high school, and to put it bluntly, my home life sucks. My mom, Angela, is barely around. She works nights at a casino, sleeps through the day, and when she is awake, she's usually either scrolling through Facebook, yelling at someone on the phone, or complaining about how much she hates her job. My stepdad, Derek, works construction and thinks parenting means buying beer and telling me to be a man. I don't have siblings. My mom had me when she was 19, and my biological dad bailed before I was even born. I used to ask about him when I was little, and she'd just say, he wasn't cut out for this. Like I was some chore he didn't want to finish. So, yeah, not exactly the warmest upbringing, but this story isn't about them. It's about Mr. Carson, my math teacher. Mr. Carson is the kind of teacher everyone likes. Even the kids who hate math. He's in his mid-30s, always wears button-down shirts with rolled-up sleeves, and somehow manages to make geometry sound interesting. He doesn't talk down to anyone, and he actually listens when people speak. I noticed that right away last year when I first had him for Algebra 2. Back then I was quiet, like, don't even raise your hand quiet. I'd show up, do my work, keep my head down, but he noticed me. Not in some weird or dramatic way, just small things, like when he'd check in after class if I seemed off, or when he started saying, good work, Alex, instead of just good work. It sounds minor, but when you're invisible most of the time, even that can make your heart ache. One afternoon, I was sitting in the back of class staring at my notebook instead of actually doing my assignment. Mr. Carson came by and crouched next to my desk. Everything okay, Alex? He asked. I shrugged. Yeah, just tired. He nodded, not buying it. You've been tired a lot lately. It wasn't accusatory. Just observant, like he was saying, I see you that day. I told him more than I'd told any adult in years. About my mom working all night, about how loud Derek gets when he's drunk, about how sometimes I stay late at school just to avoid going home. He didn't interrupt. Didn't say something cliché like, hang in there. He just listened, then quietly said, you don't deserve that kind of environment. You know that, right? I almost cried right there. After that, he'd check in more often. Nothing weird. Just human. Sometimes he'd leave a granola bar or a sandwich in his drawer for anyone who forgot lunch. I always ended up being anyone. He even helped me sign up for a math competition. And when I actually placed third, he took me and another student to get burgers to celebrate. It was the first time an adult had ever done something like that for me. And that's when the thought started creeping in, this irrational, wild thought that maybe, just maybe, if he were my dad, things would be different. It wasn't some fantasy about a perfect life. I just imagined what it would be like to come home and not flinch at the sound of someone yelling, to have dinner at a table where people actually talk to each other, to have someone say, I'm proud of you, and mean it. I know he has his own life. He's married to Rachel, a nurse, and they have a baby daughter. He talks about them sometimes in class. How tired he is because the baby didn't sleep. How he and his wife take turns making dinner. It sounds simple, but it always made me wish I could see what that kind of home felt like just once, a few months ago, after another fight between my mom and Derek that ended with me sleeping in my car for the night. I came to school completely drained. Mr. Carson noticed right away. Rough night? He asked softly before class. Something like that, I muttered. He didn't press, but after class, he handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it later and found the name and number of a school counselor who specializes in family support, along with a note that said, you don't have to go through this alone. Please talk to her. That night, sitting in my car again, I just stared at that note. I knew he couldn't do more than that. He's a teacher. There are boundaries. But the fact that he cared enough to notice, it hit me harder than I expected. Then last week, I overheard two teachers in the hallway talking. One of them said, Carson's such a natural dad. Those kids adore him, and I don't know what came over me, but the words just echoed in my head. Natural dad. That's when the question hit me. Ridiculous. Impossible, but it wouldn't leave my brain. Should I ask him to adopt me? Obviously, I know that's not how life works. He's not legally allowed to just take me in. I'm almost 18 anyway. But emotionally, I keep wondering if it would be weird to tell him how much he means to me. How he probably changed my life without even realizing it. I've never had an adult I could trust. Not like this. I want to say thank you, but I don't know how to do it without sounding desperate. Sometimes I imagine just saying it outright. "Mr. Carson, you're the closest thing I've ever had to a dad." But then I picture how awkward that could make things. What if he feels uncomfortable? What if he thinks I'm crossing a line? Still, every day, when I walk into his class and he says, "Hey Alex, glad you're here," I feel this little warmth that I never got at home. It's pathetic, maybe, but it's real. Graduation's coming up in a few months. I'll probably never see him again after that. And it scares me, because for the first time, someone gave me hope that adults don't always leave. And now I'm about to lose that too, so yeah. I know I can't ask him to adopt me, but I think I might write him a letter before graduation. Not to make things weird, not to cross any lines, just to tell him the truth, that he made a difference, that sometimes a kind teacher can be the one person who reminds a kid like me that we're not broken. I don't think he'll ever really know what he saved me from, but I want him to know he did. Update. It's been about 3 weeks since I wrote that post, and a lot has happened. Honestly, I wasn't even sure if I'd ever post an update, but I've been rereading some of the comments people left on the original thread. Most of them were kind, some were blunt, and a few made me cry in a good way. I think I owe it to the people who took the time to respond, and maybe to myself, to explain what's happened since then. First off, I didn't end up asking Mr. Carson to adopt me. That much should be obvious, but I did do something that, for me, was just as terrifying. I told him how much he's helped me. It took me days to even figure out how to say it. I kept starting and stopping, crumpling up pages of a letter before finally realizing I just needed to say it out loud. I waited until the end of class on a Friday when most of the students had already left. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my notebook. "Hey, Mr. Carson," I said. "Can I talk to you for a second?" He smiled, the same calm, patient smile he always gives people. "Of course, Alex. What's up?" I told him I just wanted to thank him for everything this year. For listening, for noticing, for caring when he didn't have to. I said that he'd made a bigger difference than he probably realized, and that his kindness made me feel like maybe I wasn't as invisible as I thought. Halfway through, my throat closed up. I couldn't even look him in the eyes. I felt embarrassed, like I was saying too much, like I was being some overly emotional kid. But he didn't make it weird. He just waited for me to finish, then said quietly, "That means more than you know, Alex. Thank you for telling me that. You've worked hard this year, and I'm really proud of you." It wasn't some dramatic movie moment with tears and music swelling in the background. It was simple, but it hit me harder than I expected. I nodded, trying not to cry, and he just said, "You're gonna do great things, okay? Don't forget that." That was it. A small conversation, but it was like a weight lifted off me for the first time. I didn't feel like I was carrying all of this by myself. After that, things started slowly changing. Mr. Carson must have mentioned something to the school counselor, Ms. Davis, because she asked me to stop by her office one afternoon to check in. Normally, I would have made up an excuse to avoid it, but this time I went. I figured maybe it was time to stop pretending I was fine. Ms. Davis was kind, the kind that feels steady instead of forced. We talked about home life, about college plans, about how I've been trying to keep my head above water for years. She listened. She didn't push, just helped me sort through what options I had. She mentioned that I could apply for a few scholarships that focus on students from tough backgrounds. She also told me about a summer program that helps people find housing if they're aging out of unstable situations. When I told her I didn't want to cause trouble for anyone, she said, "You're not causing trouble. You're trying to survive." Those words stuck with me. I haven't completely escaped my home situation yet, but things are shifting. I'm spending less time there, more time at the library or with friends. One of my friends, Jason, said his mom wouldn't mind if I crashed at their place once in a while. I haven't taken him up on it yet, but it's nice to know I have somewhere to go. As for Mr. Carson, he's still the same, steady, kind, normal, but there's something new too, a quiet understanding. When he catches my eye in class, he doesn't need to say anything. I think he knows I'm trying to hold on and move forward. One small but huge thing happened last week. He handed me my graded test and said, "Hey, I heard you're thinking about college. Have you decided where you might apply?" I told him I wasn't sure that money was a problem, and he said, "Don't let that stop you. Apply anyway. You're smart enough to get scholarships. I can help you with recommendation letters if you want." And I swear, for a second, my brain short-circuited, because no adult in my life had ever said, "I'll help you." It's weird. Sometimes I catch myself still wishing I could be part of his family. I see him talk about his baby daughter, and I imagine what it would feel like to grow up in that kind of love. But then I remind myself, maybe I don't need him to be my dad. Maybe it's enough that he showed me what a good adult looks like, what compassion actually feels like. That realization has been huge for me. It's like I finally understand that love doesn't have to mean possession. Sometimes it's just the quiet act of someone believing in you when you don't believe in yourself. Graduation is in a few weeks. I already wrote a thank you card for him. I haven't given it to him yet, but it's sitting in my backpack. Inside, I wrote, "You reminded me that I'm worth caring about. That's something I'll never forget." And maybe that's what I was really looking for all along. Not to be adopted, but to be seen, believed in, and given a reason to hope. Final update, graduation came and went. And honestly, it still doesn't feel real. The last few weeks have been some of the most emotional of my life. In the best and strangest ways. I didn't expect so many people to care about my story, both here and in real life. Reading all the responses from my original post and update, I can't even put into words how much they meant, so I wanted to write one last update, partly to say thank you, and partly to close this chapter properly. A few days before graduation, I finally gave Mr. Carson that letter I mentioned. I slipped it into a plain white envelope with a short note on the front. For when you have a quiet moment. I didn't want him to feel pressured to read it in front of me. So I gave it to him after class and just said, "This is a thank you. You don't have to say anything." He looked surprised, not uncomfortable, just touched, and said, "Thank you, Alex. I'll make sure to read it." That was it. I didn't expect anything more. Then, on the day of graduation, after all the chaos and the photos and the hugs and the caps flying in the air, I was walking out to the parking lot with a couple of friends when I heard someone call my name. It was Mr. Carson. He was holding a small, wrapped package. He said, "I wasn't sure if I'd see you after the ceremony, but I wanted to give you something." Inside was a fountain pen, the kind that looks old-fashioned, with a nice weight to it. On the box, he'd written a note in neat handwriting. "For all the forms you'll fill out, the notes you'll take, and the things you'll write that matter. You've got a story worth telling. Keep writing it, I swear." I almost cried right there in the parking lot. He didn't make it dramatic. He didn't hug me or say something overly sentimental. He just smiled and said, "I'm really proud of you. Don't lose your momentum. You've got a good head on your shoulders. Use it." That's the thing about him. He never made me feel like a charity case. He treated me like a person, someone capable, not broken. That's probably why his words always stuck so deeply. A week later, I got an email from the scholarship program Ms. Davis helped me apply to. I got in. It covers housing and tuition at a state university not far from where I live now. When I found out, I literally sat on the floor of my room and cried. Not because I got money, but because for the first time, I could see a future that didn't involve just surviving. I told Ms. Davis first, then, after a lot of hesitation, I emailed Mr. Carson. I didn't want to sound like I was bragging, but I wanted him to know his encouragement meant something. He replied the same day. The subject line just said, "Proud of you, Alex." The body of the email read, "You worked for this, you earned it. Thank you for letting me be part of your journey. Don't forget to check in once in a while. I expect updates." It was such a small thing, but it made me realize something important. The people who genuinely care about you don't disappear when the context changes. Teachers, mentors, counselors, they can be the kind of family you choose, even if you never live under the same roof. I haven't moved out completely yet. My mom and Derek are still in the picture. But the dynamic has changed. I don't rely on them emotionally anymore. I stopped trying to make them into people they're not. It's not bitterness. It's just acceptance. They have their flaws, and I have my boundaries now. I've started journaling again. Something I used to do when I was younger before everything got too heavy. It's helping me process everything that's happened. Sometimes when I'm writing, I catch myself using the pen Mr. Carson gave me. And it reminds me of how far I've come from the kid who thought no one noticed him. And about that question from the original post, should I ask my math teacher to adopt me? No, I didn't need to, because in his own way, he already gave me what I was really asking for. Stability, belief, and a sense of worth. I don't need a legal adoption to know he cared. That realization has changed the way I see the world. For a long time, I thought love was something you had to earn. Now I know that sometimes it just shows up quietly, in the form of someone leaving a granola bar in their drawer, or offering to write a letter of recommendation, or giving you a pen to remind you that your story matters. I'm leaving for college in 2 months. It's both exciting and terrifying, but I'm ready for once. I'm not running from something. I'm running towards something. If anyone reading this is in a similar situation, If you're that kid who feels invisible, who stays late at school just to avoid home, please listen to me. You're not unlovable. You don't have to earn care. You just need one person to show you that you matter. And sometimes that's enough to change your whole life. I found that person, and I hope someday you find yours too. Stories number 7. Didn't want to break a family tradition, just to please my sister-in-law. Now everyone thinks I'm the villain. I never imagined something as simple as a Christmas morning breakfast would turn into a full-blown family war. But here we are. For context, I'm a 33-year-old woman married to my husband, Alex, who's 35. We've been together for almost 10 years, and in that time, I've grown really close to his family. Or at least I thought I had. His parents, Richard and Susan, are lovely people. And his younger sister, Katie, has always been a bit intense. She's 31, very opinionated, and tends to center everything around herself. Whether she realizes it or not, for as long as Alex can remember, his family has had the same Christmas morning tradition. Everyone, and I mean everyone, gathers at his parents' house at 8 a.m. sharp for breakfast before opening gifts. It's been going on for decades. When I joined the family, I was excited to be part of it. His mom makes cinnamon rolls from scratch, his dad does bacon and eggs, and everyone wears ridiculous matching pajamas. It's loud, messy, and a bit chaotic, but it's one of those wholesome things that feels like the heart of the holidays. This past Christmas, though, things got complicated because of Katie's new wife, Taylor. They got married last summer after about 2 years together, and Taylor seems nice enough, quiet, thoughtful, but clearly anxious in social settings. I liked her from the start and tried to make her feel welcome. But ever since they got married, Katie's been acting like the whole family needs to rearrange itself to accommodate Taylor's preferences. Apparently, Taylor's family doesn't celebrate Christmas the same way. She grew up in a household that did everything later in the day because her parents worked night shifts. She's not a morning person, and she made it very clear that she doesn't function well before 10 a.m. Katie started saying it was unfair to expect Taylor to show up early, especially since she's new and still adjusting. At first, everyone just kind of brushed it off. We thought it would be fine. Taylor could come later if she wanted. But Katie started pushing harder, saying that we should move the breakfast to 11 a.m. so everyone can participate equally. She said it would be inclusive and more considerate. Now, this might not sound like a big deal on paper, but moving the time actually throws off a lot. Alex's parents host a huge lunch for extended family at noon, and moving breakfast would make the whole day a rush. Plus, part of what makes the morning special is that it's early. It's when the kids run downstairs to see their gifts, and everyone's still in pajamas. Susan, my mother-in-law, was polite but firm when she told Katie that the tradition has always been early. She said Taylor was more than welcome to come later if she needed extra rest, and no one would hold it against her. But Katie wasn't having it. She said it would be exclusionary to go ahead without her, that it made Taylor feel othered, and that if we didn't move the breakfast, they both would skip it. That's when the family started splintering. Alex tried to talk to Katie privately, but it didn't go well. She accused him of being insensitive, and said I was encouraging him to take sides. I wasn't. I literally said, let's just follow your parents' lead. The tension built for weeks leading up to Christmas. Group texts got passive-aggressive. Susan tried to mediate, but Katie accused her of favoring tradition over people. Richard tried joking it off, saying, if I can be up at 6 a.m. to cook bacon, so can everyone else, but that didn't help either. Finally, 2 nights before Christmas, Katie called me directly. She said, look, can't you convince Mom and Dad to move breakfast? They'll listen to you. Everyone likes you. I told her gently that it wasn't really my place to interfere with her parents' decision. She snapped, so you're fine with excluding Taylor? I said, like Katie, no one's excluding anyone. Taylor is welcome anytime, but this tradition means something to your parents. It's their thing. She hung up on me. On Christmas morning, Alex and I showed up as usual. The house was warm, cozy, and full of that cinnamon smell that always makes me feel like a kid again. But there was this dark cloud hanging over everyone because Katie and Taylor didn't show. Susan tried to stay cheerful, but I could tell she was upset. She kept glancing toward the door like she expected them to walk in any second. When breakfast was over and we were opening presents, Susan's phone dinged. It was a text from Katie. Hope you enjoy your inclusive family tradition without us. Yeah, that hurt. After the holidays, it just blew up. Katie started telling everyone that I was the one who convinced Susan not to move the breakfast. She said I was being passive-aggressive and territorial about family traditions that weren't even mine. I was stunned. I called her, tried to explain, but she refused to talk to me. Alex tried too, but she blocked him. Susan and Richard were heartbroken. They love both their kids, and they hate conflict. Then Taylor posted a long, vague message on Facebook about how some families claim to be loving but refuse to make space for others who are different. People commented things like, "You deserve better," and "Toxic families are the worst." It was obvious who she was talking about. Now, almost a year later, the family still feels divided. Katie and Taylor didn't come for Easter, and they've already said they might not make it for Christmas this year. Susan keeps saying she wants to fix things, but she doesn't know how. Alex told me not to feel guilty. But I do. I didn't mean to be stubborn. I just didn't think changing a decades-old family tradition for one person made sense. But now I can't shake the feeling that maybe I should have pushed harder for compromise. Was I wrong for not standing up more for Taylor's comfort? Or is this one of those situations where you can't please everyone no matter what you do? All I know is that what used to be my favorite time of year now feels like walking on broken glass. It's been almost a full year since the Christmas breakfast debacle, and I didn't plan on updating. But so much has happened that it feels like the story needs a proper continuation. After last year's fallout, the tension between Katie and the rest of the family didn't magically go away. For months there was nothing but silence. No texts, no calls, no "Happy Easter," not even a happy birthday for Alex. His parents were heartbroken but tried to respect Katie's space. I, on the other hand, couldn't stop replaying everything in my head, wondering if I could have handled things differently. Around mid-July, Susan called me one night and said she wanted to try again this Christmas. She was determined to bring the family back together. She asked me if I'd help her plan something neutral, maybe a pre-Christmas dinner at a restaurant instead of the traditional breakfast at their house. That way, no one could accuse her of choosing one side over the other. I thought it was a great idea. She texted Katie about it, explaining that she really wanted to see them, that it didn't have to be early or anything. Katie responded with a short message. "We'll see." It wasn't exactly promising, but it was something. Fast forward to late November. Susan made a reservation at a nice restaurant that could fit everyone. Us, her, Richard, and hopefully Katie and Taylor. I didn't want to get my hopes up, but Susan sounded genuinely excited. Then 2 weeks before the dinner, Katie called Alex. That alone shocked him since she hadn't spoken to him directly in almost a year. Apparently, she wanted to clear the air, but she made it clear she didn't want me involved in the conversation. Alex told her that wasn't fair, but he agreed to talk, thinking maybe it was progress. He came home from that call looking drained when I asked what she said. He told me Katie still insists that I was the reason their family fell apart. She said I'd influenced Susan and made her feel like an outsider. She also said that Taylor still feels hurt, claiming that we never made space for her to feel included. Alex told her that wasn't true, that everyone had welcomed Taylor with open arms, and the only thing anyone said no to was changing the long-standing breakfast time. He said Katie just sighed and said, "You don't get it. You're protecting her because she's your wife." That really hit him hard. When he told me this, I felt this mix of frustration and sadness. I'd spent months feeling guilty, second-guessing myself, wondering if I'd been too rigid. But hearing that she still wasn't willing to see it from anyone else's perspective made me realize something. Katie wasn't actually looking for compromise. She wanted control. Still, I told Alex that if it would help heal things, I'd be willing to reach out directly. He said it might be worth a shot, but to tread carefully, so I sent her a text. I kept it simple. "Hey Katie, I just wanted to say that I've been thinking about you both and hope you're doing well. I know things got messy last Christmas, and I really wish it hadn't happened that way. I never meant to hurt you or Taylor. I hope we can start fresh at the family dinner." No response. Then, a week later, Taylor posted something on her Instagram story. A photo of a chosen family dinner with the caption, "Sometimes you have to walk away from traditions that hurt you." That stung. When the dinner day came, Susan was nervous but hopeful. She even ordered extra desserts, just in case, Katie and Taylor showed. But as the clock ticked past the reservation time, it became clear they weren't coming. Susan kept checking her phone. Finally, she got a text from Katie. We decided not to come. Maybe next year? She didn't even bother to apologize. After that, things kind of broke for good, Susan cried at the restaurant. Richard was furious in that quiet, disappointed way dads get. Alex held my hand the whole time, and all I could think was how sad it was that a family could unravel over something so small. A few weeks later, Susan called Katie again. I could hear her voice from the speakerphone in our kitchen. She said, "Honey, I love you, but this has gone too far. We've tried." "I don't know what else you want." Katie said something that floored me. "I just want you to pick a side," Susan replied. "There aren't supposed to be sides in a family," Katie said. "There are when people don't take accountability." And then she hung up. That was it. It's been almost another year since then, and there's still no reconciliation. Susan sends Katie messages on birthdays and holidays that go unanswered. Alex has reached out several times, but she always deflects or says she's not ready. I gave up trying after my last text went ignored. The weird part? Despite all of that, I don't feel angry anymore, just sad. Sad that a woman I once called my sister-in-law has completely cut us off over something that could have been solved with a little empathy on both sides. This Christmas, Susan told us she's not doing the big breakfast anymore. She said it just doesn't feel the same. I offered to host it at our house instead. To keep the spirit alive, she smiled and said, "I'd like that." We did it. Smaller, quieter, but still full of love. I made cinnamon rolls for the first time, and when Alex's parents walked in, Susan actually cried. She said, "It feels like home again. Maybe that's the lesson here. Sometimes traditions don't have to die. They just have to evolve. And sometimes, the family that shows up is the one that matters most." Still, I hope someday Katie and Taylor find their way back. Not for the sake of tradition, but for the sake of peace. Because holding on to resentment is a heavy way to live. It's been almost 2 full years since I first posted about the family tradition, and I think it's finally time to close the book on this chapter. So much has changed since then that I almost don't recognize the people we all were back when it started. Back when this was just about breakfast, after last Christmas, the silence became permanent. Katie and Taylor never came around, and there were no more half-hearted texts or missed calls. At first, I thought it would get easier. That if I stopped checking my phone or wondering if they'd show up next year, I could move on. But family doesn't just disappear from your heart because they stop showing up at your door. This past spring, Alex got a message from one of Katie's old friends. She told him that Katie and Taylor had moved to Denver for Taylor's new job, and that they'd started over, apparently. Katie told her she's done trying with people who don't understand her values. That one hurt, because the truth is, I did try. We all did. But sometimes, people rewrite history to make themselves feel justified. Alex didn't say much after hearing that. He just stared at his phone for a long time and then said, "I guess that's it then." For a while, I could tell he wanted to reach out again. He's the type who doesn't like loose ends. But when his mom had a small health scare in June, nothing major, just a fainting episode that sent her to the ER, Katie didn't even text. That was the moment Alex finally stopped waiting. He said something that stuck with me. "If she can't even check on Mom, I can't keep chasing her." That summer, Susan and Richard decided to sell their big old house and move closer to us. They said the place felt too big for 2 people and too full of ghosts. When we helped them pack, Susan found an old photo album full of Christmas mornings, birthdays, vacations, everything. She sat down on the floor with it and cried quietly while flipping through pages. I sat beside her and held her hand. She looked up at me and said, "You know, for years, I thought traditions were what made a family, but now I think it's the people who stay, no matter how hard it gets." That line has lived rent-free in my head ever since. When December rolled around again, I didn't know what kind of Christmas we'd have. Part of me was afraid that without the old routine, it would feel empty, but something unexpected happened. Our small gathering felt peaceful. Susan and Richard came over. I made breakfast, which, for the record, turned out amazing this year, and Alex surprised me with a little ornament that said, "New traditions, same love." It made me tear up. Halfway through brunch, Susan's phone buzzed. It was a text from Katie. No Merry Christmas, no how are you, just a single photo, an ultrasound, underneath it said. "Figured you should know." Everyone froze. Richard put down his fork. Susan covered her mouth and Alex just stared. Susan texted back immediately something like, "Oh my God, congratulations, how are you feeling? When are you due?" No response. A few hours later, she sent another. "We'd love to be part of your life again. Honey, no matter what happened, we love you." Still nothing. I could see the heartbreak all over her face. But at the same time, there was this flicker of hope, the tiniest one, that maybe this baby might bring everyone back together one day. We talked about it a lot that evening, after Alex's parents went home. He said he's happy for his sister, genuinely, but that he doesn't have it in him to chase her anymore. And I agreed. At some point, love has to include self-respect, but I'll admit something here that I haven't told anyone else. Not even Alex. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, I texted Katie. I told her congratulations, that I was happy for her, that despite everything, I still loved her, and wanted her to know her child would be born into a family that would love them too. No matter how messy things have been, she didn't respond. But I saw the message mark read, and for now, that's enough. Because maybe healing doesn't look like big reunions or tearful apologies. Maybe it's quieter, like sending a text that might never get a reply, but doing it anyway because you've decided to let go of resentment. It's strange. I started this story 2 years ago thinking it was about family traditions, or pride, or standing up for what's fair, but now, I think it's just about forgiveness. The kind that doesn't always get recognized but still matters. We'll still have breakfast this year, smaller again, but warm, with laughter and love and no pressure to make it perfect. And if one day Katie walks back through the door, I'll set another plate on the table without a single "I told you so," because family, at the end of the day, is just people trying their best, even when they don't get it right. Stories number 8. I deeply regret having my son and being his mom. I never thought I'd be one of those parents, you know, the ones who post anonymous confessions online about regretting their kids. I used to think that kind of talk was cruel, even monstrous. But here I am, typing this while sitting in my car outside a Target parking lot, trying not to cry because I needed to escape the house for 10 minutes of silence. I'm 34 years old. My name's Rachel. And my son Ethan just turned 7. He's a lot, and that's putting it kindly. He's loud, defiant, exhausting. He never seems happy no matter what I do. I love him. I do, but I don't like him. And that's the hardest thing I've ever admitted. Even to myself, before Ethan, I used to be full of life. I worked in marketing, had close friends, traveled whenever I could. I loved my husband Tom, in that fun, passionate way you love someone when you're still young and figuring life out together. When I got pregnant, we were both shocked but excited. We weren't planning for kids yet, but we thought, why not? We'll make it work. Everyone told us how wonderful parenthood would be. How it would change everything for the better. They were half right. It did change everything, just not for the better. The pregnancy itself was brutal. I had preeclampsia, constant nausea, and ended up on bed rest. I hated every minute of it when Ethan was born. It wasn't like the movies. There wasn't that magical rush of love when they placed him in my arms. I remember staring at him, red, crying, fragile, and feeling nothing but fear, and then guilt for not feeling what I was supposed to feel. Everyone said the love would come later. It's just the baby blues, they said. But it didn't come later. It came in small flickers that never seemed to last. Tom went back to work 2 weeks after Ethan was born. And suddenly I was alone all day with this screaming, inconsolable infant. He cried for hours, every day. And nothing helped. Doctors said he had colic. He'll grow out of it, they said. But as the months went on, Ethan didn't grow out of it. He just grew into new challenges. He wouldn't sleep unless I was holding him. He'd throw food, hit other toddlers, scream in public places until people stared. By the time he was 3, I was a shell of myself. I quit my job because daycare called me so often I couldn't keep up. Ethan bit another child. Ethan threw a chair. Ethan said the F word. I don't even curse at home. He must have picked it up from TV or another kid. Every day felt like a battle, and I was always losing. Tom started working longer hours. He said it was for us, to save for the future. But I knew it was because he couldn't handle being home. When he was home, he'd walk in, kiss Ethan on the head, and then retreat to his office. I started resenting him, resenting both of them. When Ethan was 5, he got diagnosed with ADHD. That at least gave us an explanation, but no real relief. Medication helped a little, but not enough. He's still impulsive, destructive, and quick to anger. Every morning is chaos. Him refusing to put on clothes, brushing his teeth only after I've begged him 10 times, screaming that I'm mean when I take away his tablet. Last week, he told me he hates me. I wish you weren't my mom, he screamed when I told him no to ice cream before dinner. He slammed the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall and shattered. I just stood there, staring at the mess, thinking, yeah, me too, kid. The guilt hit right after. Like it always does, I cried in the bathroom. Silently, because if Tom saw me, he'd just say, you're too hard on yourself. But he doesn't get it. He doesn't see what I see when he's gone. There are moments, Small, rare ones. Where Ethan can be sweet. When he falls asleep next to me after reading a book. When he draws me pictures and says, "You're the best, Mommy." But even then, I feel like I'm faking it, smiling because I'm supposed to. Not because I feel joy. I've tried therapy. I've tried parenting classes. I've tried every positive discipline method on the internet. Nothing sticks. It feels like I'm failing every day. And worse. I'm starting not to care. I fantasize sometimes about running away. Just packing a bag and leaving, not forever, just for a while. To remember what quiet feels like. To remember who I am. Because somewhere between Ethan's tantrums, Tom's absences, and the crushing pressure of being a good mom, I lost myself. A few months ago, my sister Allison visited. She has 2 kids, calm, polite, sweet kids. She means well, but she always says things that sting. Maybe you just need to be more consistent with him. Have you tried cutting out sugar? I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I've tried everything, and nothing works. That maybe, just maybe, I wasn't built for this. The worst part is the shame. The shame of knowing that I'm supposed to love this little boy more than anything. And sometimes, I wish he'd never been born. That thought alone makes me feel like the world's worst person. I look at other moms on Facebook, smiling, posting pictures of their kids' soccer games, baking cookies together, and I feel like a fraud. They seem fulfilled. I feel trapped. Tom and I barely talk anymore. We coexist, sharing space but not much else. I know he loves Ethan, but he doesn't carry the weight I do. He gets to be fun dad. I'm the tired one. The nag, the disciplinarian. Last night, Ethan had another meltdown over brushing his teeth. He threw the toothbrush across the room and screamed until he made himself sick. I cleaned up, put him in bed, and then just sat in the dark living room for an hour, staring at nothing. That's when it hit me. I don't just regret the choices I made. I regret the person I've become. Because of him, I'm angry all the time. I'm exhausted. I'm bitter. I've lost every piece of softness I used to have. And yet, even as I write this, I know that tomorrow morning, I'll get up, make him breakfast, and keep trying because what else can I do? He didn't ask to be born. He didn't ask for me as his mom. I just wish, more than anything, that I could go back in time and warn my younger self. Not to scare her, but to tell her the truth. Motherhood isn't always beautiful. Sometimes, it's lonely and ugly and full of regrets you can't admit out loud. But maybe, by writing it here, I can finally breathe a little. Maybe there are other moms out there who feel this way too, and just need someone to say it first because I do love him. In the way a tired, broken heart can still love. But sometimes, love isn't enough to make it feel worth it. And that's the truth I live with every single day. It's been about 6 months since I wrote that post. And to be honest, I wasn't sure if I'd ever come back to give an update. But the response I got, even though I didn't share it publicly, changed something in me. Writing it all out forced me to look at the truth, to really see how deep my resentment and exhaustion had gone. And I guess I owe it to myself, and to Ethan, to be honest about what's happened since then. After that night, when I sat crying in the car outside Target, I realized I couldn't keep going the way I was. Something had to give. So I made a decision that terrified me. I told Tom I needed space, real space. Not just an hour at Starbucks or a walk around the block, but a few weeks, alone. He was shocked at first. "You're saying you want to leave?" he asked, his face tight like he was waiting for me to say something unforgivable. I told him no. I didn't want to leave him or Ethan forever, but I needed to breathe. I needed to remember who I was outside of being someone's mother. Someone's wife. We argued for 2 hours. He said it wasn't fair, that I was abandoning our son. But eventually, he agreed to let me stay with my sister Allison for a while. That first week at Allison's was surreal. Her kids were calm and well-behaved like always, and watching her family function so smoothly made me feel both envious and small. But I also slept, really slept, for the first time in years. I didn't realize how much of my body was living in survival mode until it wasn't. Allison and I talked late into the night one evening, and I finally told her everything. The regret, the guilt, the resentment. I expected her to judge me, but she didn't. She just listened, then said quietly, "Rach, I think you might have postpartum depression that never really went away." I brushed it off at first. Ethan was 7. How could it still be postpartum? But something about what she said stuck with me. When I got home a few weeks later, I called my old therapist, Dr. Monroe, and made an appointment. That session broke me open. I cried through the whole hour. She didn't flinch when I told her that sometimes I wish I hadn't become a mom. or that I don't feel joy around Ethan. Instead, she nodded and said, "It sounds like you've been trying to survive motherhood without any real support." We started meeting weekly again, and she helped me see something I'd ignored for years. I'd been carrying all the emotional and physical labor of parenting on my own. Tom wasn't malicious, he just wasn't aware. And because I never asked for help, at least not directly, he assumed I was handling it, so I started being direct, painfully, awkwardly direct when Tom got home from work. Instead of silently resenting him while I made dinner, I said, "I need you to take over for the next hour so I can go for a walk." At first, he looked surprised, then defensive, but slowly. He started doing it. We also started family therapy. Something I never thought I'd agree to. The first session was rough. Ethan wouldn't sit still. Tom was tense, and I could feel my old frustration bubbling up. But the therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Patel, told us something that stuck. Ethan's behavior isn't about defiance. It's communication. Kids act out when they don't feel safe or seen. That hit me like a gut punch. Because if I was honest, I hadn't been seeing Ethan for a long time. I'd been managing him, enduring him, but not connecting. It wasn't some magical transformation overnight. He's still a handful. The tantrums still happen, though less often. But something in me shifted. Maybe because I'm finally getting help. Maybe because I stopped pretending motherhood had to look like it does on Instagram. One night, Ethan came into my room after having a nightmare. Usually I'd be half asleep and irritated, but that night I just pulled him close and asked what happened. He mumbled about monsters, and then, in that drowsy, vulnerable way kids have, he said, "I love you, Mommy, even when you get mad." That broke me in the best way. Because he knows I struggle, he knows I get angry, but he still loves me anyway. A few weeks later, I found a drawing in his backpack of our family. Me, Tom, and him, all holding hands under a crooked sun. I wasn't smiling in the picture, but Ethan had drawn a big heart above my head. When I asked him why, he said, "Because you don't smile a lot, but I know you love me anyway." I cried in the kitchen for 10 minutes after that. Things with Tom are still a work in progress. We argue less, but we also talk more. Real conversations, not just logistics. He admitted he'd been scared of me leaving. Scared of losing his family, and that's why he buried himself in work. We've started doing small things together again. Movie nights after Ethan goes to bed. Weekend walks. Even a date night once a month. The biggest change, though, is me. I've stopped chasing the fantasy version of motherhood I thought I was supposed to live up to. I don't try to be perfect anymore. I let Ethan eat cereal for dinner sometimes. I take breaks. I forgive myself for losing my temper. I also joined an online support group for parents who struggle with parental regret. That community saved me. There's something healing about hearing other moms say, "Me too," and realizing you're not alone in the dark thoughts you've been ashamed to speak aloud. And you know what? I'm just starting, to feel something that's almost like joy again. Ethan and I planted a small garden together last month. It's messy and uneven, like everything in our lives, but it's ours. Watching him dig in the dirt, laughing and asking questions, I felt proud, maybe even happy. I still have days where I fantasize about running away. I still get overwhelmed, but now I have tools. Therapy, medication, boundaries, and a little more compassion for him and for myself. If you'd told me 6 months ago that I'd ever feel hopeful again, I wouldn't have believed you. But I'm learning that motherhood isn't about being perfect. It's about surviving the hard days and still trying to love through them. I don't regret Ethan anymore. I regret how alone I let myself feel. We're both learning, together, how to start over. It's been just over a year since I first wrote that post. And sitting down to write this final update feels surreal. If you had told me back then that I'd be writing this from a place of peace instead of despair, I probably would have laughed or cried, or both. But here I am. Not fixed, not perfect. Not some glowing Pinterest version of motherhood, just better, healing. Life looks different now, for one thing. I went back to work part-time. That decision alone changed everything. I'd left my job in marketing after Ethan was born, and for years I told myself I'd go back when things calmed down. But things never calmed down. I was drowning in the day-to-day, convincing myself I wasn't capable of more. It was actually Dr. Monroe, my therapist, who gently said, "Rachel, you need something that's yours again." So, I applied for a part-time position at a small local firm. When they offered it, I almost turned it down out of guilt. How could I leave Ethan at daycare more than he already was? But then I thought about the version of me who had sat crying in her car, hating her life and herself, and realized that woman couldn't keep being the only version of me Ethan knew. It's only 20 hours a week, but it gave me air again. Structure, adult conversation, a sense of purpose that isn't tied to whether a 7-year-old eats his vegetables or throws his socks in the laundry. The first few weeks were rough. Ethan didn't understand why mommy wasn't home all the time anymore. There were tears, tantrums, guilt trips, "I miss you, mommy," in that small, wounded voice that can stab you right through the heart. But we adjusted. I made a rule. When I'm home, no emails, no distractions, no multitasking my affection, and the wildest thing, he started to calm down. His teachers even noticed it. His grades went up, his outbursts decreased, and he started joining activities, soccer, art club, things that gave him his own identity, too. I think he could sense that I was happier, more balanced, and he mirrored it. Kids always do. As for Tom, therapy actually stuck. We've been going every 2 weeks, even after I wanted to quit a few times. We're learning how to communicate like partners again instead of adversaries. One session, Dr. Patel asked him point blank, "What kind of husband do you think Rachel needs?" And I'll never forget what he said. "One who doesn't make her feel like she's doing it alone." He's been showing up in small but meaningful ways since then. He cooks dinner twice a week without me having to ask. He handles bedtime some nights. He learned how to braid Ethan's hair, yes. Ethan wanted cool hair for Spirit Week, and Tom actually YouTubed how to do it. There's something strangely intimate about watching your spouse parent intentionally instead of by accident. I think I fell a little back in love with him because of it. I won't lie and say everything's perfect now. There are still moments, like when Ethan whines for the 10th time that he doesn't want to brush his teeth, where I feel that old irritation simmer up. There are days where I fantasize about checking into a hotel alone for 48 hours and sleeping without anyone calling my name. But the difference is, now I don't feel like a monster for it. I've accepted that regret and love can coexist, that you can wish parts of your life had gone differently and still be deeply grateful for where you are. The hardest part, though, came a few months ago when my mom, who had been distant since Ethan's birth, called out of the blue and asked if she could visit. We've had a rocky relationship. She wasn't exactly a warm mother herself. She once told me, after Ethan was born, that motherhood isn't for everyone. And I heard that as condemnation instead of compassion. But she came, and when she saw how we live, our messy, real loud little home, she got quiet that night. She and I sat on the porch drinking tea, and she said, "You're doing better than I ever did. Rach, you're doing the hard thing, you're staying." It broke me, because I realized I'd been carrying generations of guilt and silence about what it means to be a mother. Women who struggled but never said it aloud, who smiled through the pain because they thought that's what love looked like. Ethan's almost 9 now. He's smart, curious, exhausting, and wonderful last week. He brought home a Mother's Day card from school. He'd drawn a big heart around a stick figure version of me with wild hair and coffee in my hand. And at the bottom he wrote, "Thank you for always trying. Even when you're tired." That's when I knew. He sees me, not the perfect mom I wanted to be, but the real one who's still learning. That night, after he went to bed, I sat with Tom on the couch and showed him the card. He smiled and said, "He's right, you know." And for the first time in years, I believed it. I don't regret Ethan anymore. Not even a little. I regret how lost I let myself become in trying to do everything right. I regret not asking for help sooner. But motherhood, this version of it, isn't the prison I once thought it was. It's messy and flawed and sometimes heartbreakingly human. But it's mine. I still have days where I struggle. But now, when I look at my son, I don't see the weight of responsibility. I see the person who taught me how to rebuild myself. If you're reading this and you feel like I used to, empty, guilty, trapped, please know it doesn't have to stay that way. You're not a bad parent for struggling. You're not broken for feeling regret. You're just human. And if you keep showing up even on the days you want to run, that counts, it really does. Stories number 9. When you feel like the ugly one in the relationship. I never thought I'd be that girl, the one who feels small and anxious because her boyfriend is too handsome. But that's exactly where I found myself. And it's eating at me in ways I didn't expect. I've been dating Ryan for just over a year now. He's 28, works in marketing, and he's the kind of guy people notice when he walks into a room. Not just because he's tall or fit, though he is both, but because he has that easy confidence, the kind that comes naturally to people who've always been told they're attractive. I'm 27. I work as a dental hygienist, and while I've never thought of myself as ugly, I've also never been the pretty girl. I'm average. That's the truth. When we first met, it felt surreal that someone like him even wanted to talk to me. We met at a friend's birthday party, and he started the conversation. I thought it was a joke at first. He asked me about my favorite movies, made me laugh, and by the end of the night, we'd exchanged numbers. He texted me the next day, and within a week, we were on our first date. That first month was pure excitement. I couldn't believe my luck. Ryan was sweet, funny, and really attentive. He'd compliment me all the time. My laugh, my eyes, how I looked in a certain dress. But even in those moments, something in me couldn't believe it was real. Every time we went out, I'd catch other women staring at him. Sometimes they'd flirt right in front of me. Like I wasn't even there. I tried to brush it off at first. I told myself I was just insecure, that I needed to get over it. But it got harder to ignore when even my friends started commenting. Once, my friend Hannah said, "You guys look like a model and her fan." She meant it as a joke, but it stung. Another time my coworker asked, "How did you land someone like that?" I laughed it off, but that question haunted me for days. I started comparing myself constantly. Every woman we passed on the street became a silent competition in my head. Was she prettier than me? Was Ryan looking at her? If he smiled at a waitress, my chest would tighten. He's never given me a reason not to trust him. Not once. He's always been respectful and reassuring. But my brain just won't shut up. When I see girls comment on his Instagram photos, I spiral. He doesn't even post much, but even a random emoji from some stranger makes me feel like I'm losing control. A few weeks ago, we went to his company's summer party. It was a rooftop event with music, drinks, and way too many beautiful people. He was in his element, charming everyone with his easy laugh and good manners. I tried to keep up, but at one point, I caught one of his coworkers, this stunning blonde in a silk dress, touching his arm as she talked to him. It was a casual gesture, but my stomach flipped. Later that night, when we got home, I couldn't hold it in. I asked him if he thought she was pretty. He looked surprised and said, "Yeah, she's attractive, but why are you asking?" I blurted out everything. How I felt like I wasn't good enough. How people looked at us like I was punching above my weight. How I was scared he'd wake up one day and realize he could do better. He didn't get mad, he just sat next to me, took my hand and said, "I didn't fall in love with you because of how you look. I love the way you think, how kind you are, how funny you are without even trying. I don't want anyone else." And I believed him. For a while. But the insecurity doesn't just vanish after one conversation. It's like an infection. It goes quiet for a bit, then flares up again. The worst part is how it started affecting how I act. I've caught myself doing little things I'm not proud of. Like checking his phone when he leaves it on the table. I hate that I've done that. Or scrolling through the profiles of girls who follow him, comparing myself to them. I even started dressing differently when we go out, trying harder to look hot instead of just being myself. The irony is, I used to be confident before him. Not glamorous, not flashy, but comfortable in my skin. I liked who I was. Now, I feel like I'm constantly measuring my worth against the way people look at him. A couple weeks ago, we went out to dinner, and the waitress was clearly flirting. It wasn't subtle. She was smiling extra hard, touching her hair, and laughing at everything he said. Ryan was polite, but not flirty. Still, I felt that pit in my stomach again. When she walked away, I joked, "She was totally into you." He smiled and said, "Maybe, but I'm with you." I wanted to feel reassured, but instead I just felt small, like even though he said the right thing. It didn't make me feel better because deep down, I didn't believe I deserved him. The thing is, Ryan's never made me feel lesser. This is all in my head, and I know that, but knowing doesn't make it easier. The other day, I caught myself thinking about ending things, not because I want to, but because I'm scared I'll ruin this by being so insecure. I don't want to be the jealous girlfriend, the one who needs constant reassurance. I love him, I really do, but I hate how much I need him to tell me he loves me, that he finds me beautiful. It's exhausting. Last night, he noticed I was distant. We were watching a movie, and I guess I wasn't hiding it well. He paused it and said, "What's going on?" I told him the truth, that I feel like the ugly one, that I can't stop comparing myself, that sometimes I look at him and think, what's he doing with me? He sighed and said, "You know, I get insecure too." That surprised me. He said he worries I'll leave him because I'm more emotionally grounded, more empathetic, that I make people feel at ease while he sometimes struggles with that. I had no idea, he told me. "You don't see yourself the way I see you." I wish you could. It was the first time I realized this wasn't just about looks. Relationships are about balance, and maybe we're both just trying to hold on to the parts of ourselves we're scared to lose. Since then, I've been trying to work on it. I started therapy again, and my therapist said something that stuck with me. You're not unworthy of love because someone else looks different. You're unworthy when you stop believing you deserve to be loved at all. It's a process. Some days I still look at Ryan and feel like the world is comparing us. But I'm starting to realize that maybe the only person doing the comparing is me. Ryan hasn't changed. He's still the same patient, loving guy who shows up for me every day. The only thing that needs to change is how I see myself. And for the first time, I think I'm ready to start working on that. It's been about 2 months since I wrote that. And a lot has happened, both in my head and in real life. I don't know if I'd call this progress exactly, but I'm definitely in a better place than before. After that night when Ryan told me he had insecurities too, I started seeing him less as this perfect, unattainable person, and more as an actual human being who loves me. That helped. But I won't lie, it didn't magically fix the way I see myself. Insecurity doesn't just dissolve because someone tells you you're beautiful. It takes work. I've been going to therapy weekly, and my therapist, Lila, has been helping me unpack why I feel like I'm less than. Turns out, it's not really about Ryan's looks at all. It's about me never believing I was enough, period. I've always compared myself, first to my older sister, who was the pretty one, then to my friends in college who seemed effortlessly confident, and now to random strangers online who don't even know I exist. The internet makes it worse. I follow all these influencers who look flawless even when they're casual. And then I see girls who flirt with Ryan in his comment section or send DMs, and it triggers this deep feeling of I'll never be her. So Lila had me do something that felt stupid at first. She made me list 10 things I actually like about myself that have nothing to do with looks. It took me 3 sessions to even get to 10. I said things like, I'm good at comforting people, I make really good pancakes, and I'm dependable. She smiled and said, that's who you are. That's who he fell in love with. Around the same time, Ryan and I started talking more openly about everything. Not just about my insecurities, but about what we both need. We'd fallen into this pattern where he'd reassure me constantly, and I'd keep fishing for more, which wasn't fair to either of us. Now, instead of waiting for him to guess what's wrong, I tell him, like actually say it, hey, I'm feeling insecure today. That's it. No blaming, no fighting, just honesty. One thing that changed a lot was how we spend time together in public. Before, I'd get anxious whenever we went somewhere social, parties, bars, even his friends' hangouts, because I'd feel invisible next to him. But he started doing small things that made me feel more grounded. Like, when someone would flirt or talk to him a bit too much, he'd subtly hold my hand or glance my way, not in a possessive way, but like, hey, you're my person. It's simple, but it helps. And then there was this wedding we went to last month. Big event, lots of people, lots of beautiful women. I'd been dreading it all week. The old me would have spent hours worrying about what to wear, trying to look good enough to stand next to him. But this time, I just wore a dress I actually liked and focused on enjoying myself. About halfway through the reception, I noticed a few women talking to Ryan near the bar. One of them even leaned in close while laughing, and I could feel that familiar panic creeping in. But instead of shutting down or making a scene, I just took a deep breath, sipped my drink, and reminded myself that he's always chosen me. And you know what? He came back over a few minutes later, handed me a drink and said, "You're still the prettiest one here." Old me would have brushed it off. That night I smiled and said, I know. That's when I realized something had shifted. I wasn't pretending to be confident. I actually believed it, even for a second. There's still a part of me that struggles. Though, I'd be lying if I said it's all gone. I still catch myself comparing, especially online. But I've been trying to set boundaries. Unfollowing people who make me feel like crap. Staying off social media when I'm feeling low. And focusing on things that make me feel like me. I also joined a women's hiking group on weekends. It sounds random, but it's been good for me. I'm around people who talk about things that matter. Work, friendships, goals. Not how they look. It's helping me find value in parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. Ryan's noticed the difference too, he told me recently. You seem lighter, like you're not carrying that weight anymore. I'm not sure it's completely gone, but he's right, it's lighter. What's funny is, now that I'm not constantly doubting myself, I've noticed how much he admires me. The other day, one of his coworkers asked how he and I met, and he said, "She's the one who made the first move." I didn't, technically, But he said it like he wanted her to know I'm confident. It made me laugh. I think that's what I've been missing. Remembering that I bring my own kind of light to the relationship. I don't have to be the most beautiful woman in the room. I just have to be someone who knows her worth. And as for Ryan, he still looks like he belongs on a magazine cover. And I still sometimes can't believe he's mine. But maybe it's not about being enough for him. Maybe it's about realizing I already am. It's been almost a year since I first wrote about my insecurities. And I can honestly say I've never felt more at peace with myself. Or with Ryan. Looking back, it's wild how much energy I used to spend worrying about how I looked standing next to him. It wasn't even about him, not really. It was about me needing external proof that I was enough. I thought if he found me beautiful, it meant I was safe, but love doesn't work like that. Love isn't a mirror someone holds up for you. It's a place you build together. And for the first time in my life, I finally feel like I belong in that place. After that first update, things kept improving. But not perfectly. I had setbacks. There were days when I'd spiral again, especially after seeing him interact with women online. Once, a female gamer he followed commented on one of his photos with a flirty emoji, and I immediately felt my stomach drop. Old habits die hard. I wanted to ask, who is she? But instead, I took a breath and waited. That night, I mentioned it calmly, and he said, she's literally one of the streamers I follow. I barely know her, but if it bothers you, I'll unfollow. Not because I have to, but because you matter more. That was huge for me. It wasn't about control or jealousy. It was about how he listened. No defensiveness, no eye-rolling, just understanding. We also went on a week-long trip to the mountains in North Carolina in the spring. No Wi-Fi, no social media. Just us, nature, and way too many bugs. I thought I'd hate it, but it ended up being one of the best weeks of my life. We spent our nights by a campfire, laughing and talking about everything. Our childhoods, our fears, even marriage and kids someday. It was the first time I really felt present. I didn't care what I looked like. I wasn't worried about how I compared to anyone else. I just was, when we got back. I started a photography class at a local art center. It's something I've always wanted to do but never made time for because I thought I wasn't good enough, or creative enough. Turns out, I have a real eye for portraits, especially candid ones. Funny enough, Ryan became my favorite subject. He hates posing, but when I catch him off guard, smiling, reading, cooking, it reminds me why I fell for him in the first place. Not because of his looks, but because of how kind he is. A few months later, I noticed something that made me realize how far I'd come. We were at a friend's engagement party, and a woman came up to Ryan and started chatting him up. She was beautiful. Like, movie star level beautiful. Younger, too, for a split second. That old feeling started to creep in. But instead of freezing or overthinking, I just smiled, joined the conversation, and didn't feel threatened. Not because I thought she wasn't interested, but because even if she was, it didn't matter. I know where I stand. I know who I am. After she walked away, Ryan leaned in and whispered, "You handled that like a boss," I laughed and said, "It's almost like I've grown or something." We've grown together, actually. We've both learned that love isn't just about romance. It's about respect and emotional safety. I used to think I had to earn his love by being perfect. Now I know I already had it, even when I was a mess. The biggest turning point came last month, when Ryan proposed. It wasn't some extravagant setup with photographers or hidden rose petals. We were at home, making dinner, and I was still in my pajamas with sauce on my sleeve. He handed me a glass of wine, got down on one knee and said, "You've spent so long trying to see yourself the way I see you. I think it's time you stop trying and just believe it," I cried. Of course I said yes. We're not rushing the wedding. We both want to take our time and keep things simple, but sometimes I'll catch him looking at me the same way he did when we first met, and instead of thinking, why me? I think, of course me, it's weird to say this, but I'm proud of the woman I've become. I've stopped measuring my worth by how I compare to others. I've started choosing peace over perfection, and even though I still have bad days, I've learned how to comfort myself instead of expecting someone else to fix it. If anyone reading this feels like they're not enough next to someone they love, please know you're not alone. Insecurities don't mean you're broken. They mean you care. But caring about yourself is just as important as caring about them. And if you're lucky enough to find someone who sees the beauty in your chaos, don't spend your life questioning why they love you. Just let them. Stories number 10. My dad crashed my car and my parents won't let me use theirs. When I bought my first car, it wasn't anything fancy. Just a 2014 Honda Civic I got used from a neighbor down the street. It had a few scratches, the radio only worked when it felt like it, and the AC was moody. But it was mine. I was 24, working full-time as a barista and part-time taking classes for my business degree. That car was my freedom. I remember the day I drove it home. My dad stood outside, arms crossed, watching me pull up. "You actually did it," he said, sounding half proud, half surprised. He's old school, one of those dads who believes you should walk or take the bus until you can pay for something outright. Every cent came from my savings, tips, and a few side gigs doing delivery runs. Mom took pictures. She was beaming. I remember her saying, "Now don't let your dad borrow it. He'll find a way to test the brakes on a hill or something." That joke would come back to haunt me. 3 months later, my car was totaled. It happened on a random Tuesday. I was closing up the cafe when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. "Call me right now. It's about your car." My stomach dropped. You know when something feels wrong even before you know what it is? That was it. I called her and she answered immediately. "Sweetie, don't panic," she said, which obviously made me panic. "Your dad took your car to run to the hardware store and, well, there was an accident." I froze. "What do you mean he took my car?" She stammered something about how his truck was blocked in by their neighbor's trash cans, and he didn't want to move them. So he borrowed my car because it was right there. I could barely process that before I asked, "Is he okay?" She said he was fine. A few bruises, but he'd crashed into a guardrail when trying to avoid a deer. My car, however, was done. The front end crumpled, airbags deployed, fluids leaking everywhere. The tow truck driver apparently said it was a miracle he wasn't hurt worse. I left work early and drove to the lot where they'd towed it. When I saw it, I just stood there. My car looked like it had been punched by a train. My dad was sitting on the curb next to it, looking more annoyed than remorseful. He said, "Well, the good news is I'm okay. The bad news is your car's toast." I didn't even know what to say. I wanted to scream, cry, something, but I just stood there, trying to wrap my head around it. When we got home, I asked if he planned to help pay for repairs or a replacement. He scoffed. "It was an accident, Megan. I didn't mean to crash it. You've got insurance." Yeah, I had insurance. Basic liability, because full coverage on a used Civic would have been an extra $130 a month I couldn't afford. So no, insurance wasn't covering anything. When I told him that, he actually had the nerve to say, "Well, that's on you. You should have known better." That was the first time I yelled at my dad in my adult life. I told him, "You took my car without asking, wrecked it, and now you're telling me it's my fault?" He looked shocked, like I'd just disrespected some sacred rule. Mom tried to mediate, saying, "Honey, your dad feels bad. Let's just calm down," but I wasn't having it. "Does he feel bad enough to replace what he destroyed?" I asked. Silence. Over the next few days, I had to start taking the bus again. 45 minutes each way, plus a transfer. I asked if I could borrow one of their cars, Mom's CRV or Dad's truck, just to get to work. They both said no. Dad said, "You're too emotional to be driving right now." That almost made me laugh. Too emotional? He crashed my car, and somehow I was the one being punished. At one point, Mom pulled me aside and said, "He's embarrassed, sweetie. He doesn't handle guilt well." Yeah. No kidding. Weeks went by like that. Every morning, I stood at the bus stop watching my parents' cars parked in the driveway. Sometimes I'd see Dad through the window, sipping coffee. I don't know if he felt bad or not, but he sure didn't say anything. Eventually, I started looking into small claims court. I didn't want to sue my dad, but I couldn't just eat the loss either. That car was my livelihood. I couldn't keep being late to work or missing classes because the bus was full. I mentioned the idea to Mom one night. Her face dropped. "You can't do that," she said. "It'll destroy your relationship with him," I said. "He already destroyed my trust. What's left to ruin?" She started crying. Said I was tearing the family apart. I told her I just wanted accountability, she said. "That's not how families work." I went home that night and realized, maybe that's exactly how our family works. Sweep things under the rug until resentment turns into silence. So I talked to a friend from class, Julia, whose mom is a paralegal. She told me I absolutely had grounds for a civil claim. Since my dad wasn't on my insurance and he took the car without permission, it wouldn't be a criminal case, but I could file for damages. I didn't file right away. I hesitated for weeks. Every time I imagined walking into a courtroom facing my dad, it made me sick. But one morning, after missing a work shift because the bus broke down, I finally snapped. I filled out the forms online, paid the fee, and filed. Mom found out when the papers arrived at their house. She called me sobbing, saying, How could you do this to your father? I told her. He did this to himself. Dad didn't talk to me for weeks after that. When we finally did see each other, at my cousin's birthday, he barely looked at me. I tried to make small talk, but he muttered, "You should have just talked to me instead of dragging the law into it," I said. "I did talk to you for 2 months. When the hearing finally happened, it lasted less than 20 minutes. I brought photos of the car, text messages, and the police report listing him as the driver. The judge asked if he had permission to use the vehicle. He said, not explicitly, that was enough. He was ordered to pay $7,800, roughly the value of the car. The judge even said, "This should have been resolved in the family, but it's not my place to say how you communicate." I felt relief, but also this weird sadness. I didn't want his money. I wanted him to care. He didn't say a word when it was over. Just left. A few days later, Mom came by my apartment. She said Dad was humiliated. I told her that wasn't my problem. She sighed and handed me an envelope. It was a cashier's check, the full amount. "Your father wanted me to give you this," she said. "He's too proud to hand it to you himself." I asked if he said anything else. She shook her head. "It's been 4 months now. We haven't really spoken since. I got a used Corolla with the money. Nothing fancy, but it runs great. Sometimes I drive past my parents' house on the way to work. His truck is still there, parked perfectly straight in the driveway. I wonder if he ever thinks about how much damage a single bad choice caused, not just to a car, but to everything between us." Mom texts occasionally, saying, "Your dad asks how you're doing," but never directly. I usually just say, "Tell him I'm fine. Maybe one day we'll talk again. Maybe not, but I've learned something from all of this. Family doesn't mean you let people walk all over you just because you share a last name. Sometimes, the hardest kind of respect you can give someone is holding them accountable, even if it breaks your heart to do it." It's been about 6 months since the court case, and I think I'm finally starting to process everything that happened. I didn't expect things to get weirdly quiet after that. I thought the tension would linger, but instead it felt like we collectively agreed to pretend it never happened. Dad hasn't said more than a handful of words to me since the courthouse. He'll nod in my direction if I walk into a room where he's sitting, but that's it. No sorry, no how are you doing, nothing. Mom tries, she really does. But even she admits that Dad isn't ready to face what happened. A few weeks ago, I got a call from my boss at the cafe. They were scheduling me for a weekend shift, and I realized I had no car for the first time in months. I explained the situation, and she just laughed and said, "Megan, I didn't realize you were still on foot." I laughed too. But inside I felt that old mix of anger and helplessness. Then something unexpected happened. Dad showed up at my apartment. I wasn't expecting him, so I nearly dropped my groceries. He had that tight-lipped look he always gets when he's nervous. The one where he avoids eye contact and fiddles with his hands. He started, then stopped. He looked around like he wasn't sure he belonged here. I was thinking, maybe we could talk about, the car stuff. I froze. Part of me wanted to slam the door and pretend he didn't exist. Part of me wanted to scream at him for the months of tension, the bus rides, the missed shifts, the constant reminders that he wrecked my life for a while. But I didn't. I invited him in. We sat at my tiny kitchen table, the one place I feel like myself in this apartment. Dad's hands were shaking slightly, which is rare for him. He looked human. "I know I messed up, Megan, big time. I shouldn't have taken your car. I shouldn't have—" "Dad," I interrupted softly. "I know you know what you did was wrong. I don't need you to tell me again. I need to know what you're going to do differently." He swallowed hard. I can't promise I won't ever make mistakes, but I can promise I'll ask first. I'll listen more. And I just want us to get past this." It felt surreal. After months of silence, resentment, and awkward avoidance, he was finally admitting fault and trying to make amends. We talked for almost 2 hours. He shared things about his pride, how embarrassed he felt at the courthouse, how he hated feeling like he'd failed as a parent. I shared how it felt to watch my car crushed, to lose that independence, to feel like my voice didn't matter in my own family. It wasn't easy. There were tears, and there was frustration, and yes, there were moments I wondered if I'd regret opening the door. But by the end, there was a kind of relief I hadn't felt in months. He didn't magically become the dad I always wanted him to be, and I didn't magically forget everything. But we made a plan. Small steps, no borrowing cars without asking, weekly check-ins, even if brief, just a way to start rebuilding trust. However slow it would be. The crazy part? After he left, I realized I didn't feel the same bitterness I had for so long. There's still tension, sure, and I'm still cautious, but there's also hope. And for the first time in months, I feel like maybe this mess of a family isn't completely broken. I still drive my Corolla, of course. Dad hasn't touched it, hasn't even joked about it. And honestly, that's enough for now. Because sometimes reconciliation doesn't mean everything goes back to normal. Sometimes it just means you start talking again. And that's huge. It's been over a year since the car accident, and I think I can finally say things between my dad and me are, okay, not perfect, not warm and fuzzy, but functional, which for us is practically a miracle. After that first long conversation at my apartment, we started small. No borrowing my car, ever. Dad stuck to his word. If he needed to run errands, he used his truck. Or Mom's car if mine wasn't available. I noticed a subtle shift, too. He started checking in, not every day, but enough that I didn't feel like a ghost in my own family. Mom was thrilled, naturally. She kept reminding me that he's proud of me, that he's always been proud of me, even if he doesn't say it well. And maybe she's right. Pride and love don't always translate into words, especially from my dad. But I've realized over the past year that it doesn't mean they aren't there. One of the hardest parts was actually letting go of the anger. I had spent months reliving that moment I saw my car crushed, the bus rides, the missed shifts. Even after the court case, even after the check arrived, there was a lingering bitterness that I didn't want to admit. Therapy helped a lot. Talking it out, unpacking my feelings, realizing I wasn't being unreasonable for expecting accountability. There were awkward moments, of course. Dad still has this way of saying something that's meant to be helpful but comes out entirely wrong. A few months after the accident, he sent me a text saying, "Hey, don't crash any more cars." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. But even in that weird, clumsy way, I could tell he was trying. Family gatherings have changed too. When we go to Mom's or my aunt's house, there isn't the same tension that had hovered for months. Dad will joke, carefully mind you, and I'll laugh. We've even started having short, regular conversations about life, work, and sometimes my car. Yes, we still talk about cars, but now it's more about maintenance and funny stories rather than accidents and blame. The big moment, though, came about 3 months ago. Dad called me out of the blue, said he wanted to take me for a drive. I was nervous. Old habits die hard, but I agreed. We drove around town, windows down, music playing, and he said something that stuck with me. "Megan, I know I've messed up more than once in your life. I don't want to ruin anything else. I'm proud of you, and I hope you know that, even if I don't say it right. I didn't cry. Not then, but inside I felt a huge weight lift. Finally, some recognition. Finally, a tiny bit of peace. We're still careful. Dad isn't suddenly the perfect parent, and I'm not suddenly the forgiving daughter who forgets everything. But the respect is there now. The acknowledgement that both of us have faults, and that's enough to rebuild. I bought another used car. Nothing fancy, just reliable. And this time, I keep it locked and parked in a way that only I can get to it. Dad jokes about it now. "You've got Fort Knox out here," I laugh. But I think he secretly respects the boundaries. The truth is, this whole ordeal taught me something about family and accountability. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you need to protect yourself and demand responsibility. And sometimes, slowly, painstakingly, you can find a way to forgive. Not because everything was okay, but because both people are willing to try. We aren't perfect, we probably never will be. But a year after my car was totaled, after court, after months of silence, I can finally say I feel safe again in my own family. And that, for me, is a victory. Stories number 11. My husband is the dumbest person alive. I swear to God, I love this man. But he might actually be the dumbest living human on planet Earth. Every time I think we've hit the limit, he finds a new way to surprise me. For context, I'm Samantha, 32. Married to Derek, 35. We've been together for 8 years. Married for 5. And for most of that time, I thought his quirky little absent-minded professor thing was kind of charming. Like, oh, he's forgetful, but he's smart. He loses his keys, but knows random facts about World War II planes. Cute, right? Yeah, not anymore. Now it's just exhausting. And honestly, if I didn't laugh, I'd cry. Let me start small. Derek once called me from a gas station because he thought someone stole his car. He was freaking out, saying he turned around to grab a water, and his car vanished. I was already halfway into panic mode when I asked what car he drove there. He said, "The blue one. We don't have a blue car. We've never owned a blue car." Turns out, he drove my white Corolla. parked it on the other side of the pump, and just forgot. He stood there for 15 minutes looking for a car that didn't exist. That was the beginning. It's only gotten worse. The most recent incident, the one that made me come here to vent before I exploded, involves our new house. We moved into this place about 3 months ago. It's an older home, charming but needs work. And Derek has been obsessed with doing all the DIY projects himself because YouTube University, as he calls it, has taught him everything he needs to know. So one night last week, I'm sitting on the couch, and I hear water, like running water. But not from the kitchen or the bathroom. It sounds inside the walls. I ask Derek if he hears it. He says, "Oh, yeah, I was testing something." Testing what? He smiles and says, "The new shower valve I installed." Now, I didn't know we needed a new shower valve, and I definitely didn't know he was installing one. So I asked him to show me what he meant. He walks into the bathroom looking all proud, points at the tub faucet, and says, "I think I got it mostly right, but the water pressure's weird. Mostly right. I kid you not." This man had drilled through a copper pipe inside the wall trying to adjust the valve stem, and then patched the hole with electrical tape because he saw a guy on Reddit do it once. The guy on Reddit? It was in a meme. So now we have water damage in the wall, a $400 plumbing bill, and a husband who keeps saying, "Well, at least I tried. It gets worse." This weekend, he decided to fix the ceiling fan in our bedroom because it was wobbling. I told him to just tighten the screws and call it a day. He, however, decided that wasn't enough. He wanted to balance it like they do in planes. He took apart the fan blades, sanded them, and then glued washers to the tips for symmetry. I walked in as one of the blades came flying off mid-spin and nearly decapitated the lamp. He was standing there holding a level, saying, "That's not supposed to happen." Oh, really? I love this man. I really do. He's sweet, kind, and would literally drive across town at midnight to bring me medicine if I were sick. But his brain, it lives in another dimension, like last Christmas. When I asked him to help me wrap gifts, I gave him the scissors and tape. He cut wrapping paper into individual strips like confetti because he thought I was doing the decorative thing, or when I was pregnant. And he told his coworkers I was gestating nicely. Who says that? He also told the nurse at my first ultrasound appointment that the human reproductive system is fascinating. The nurse had to leave the room because she was laughing too hard. And then there's food. Derek cannot cook to save his life. One time, he made spaghetti and used vanilla almond milk instead of cream for the sauce because it looked the same. We had sweet carbonara. He also once microwaved aluminum foil just to see what would happen. What happened was a $900 repair to the microwave. I know what you're thinking. Maybe he's just clumsy. But no, he's an engineer like a real one. The man builds machines for a living. He understands physics and design. But ask him to change a light bulb, and he'll somehow cause a blackout. I think the best example of Derek's particular brand of stupidity was the Great Ladder incident. We were painting the living room, and I told him to be careful because the floor was slick from spilled paint. He said, "I got it, babe, don't worry." 2 minutes later, I hear a crash. I run in, and he's lying on the floor, paint all over him, looking like a ghost. I panic. "Are you okay?" And he just blinks up at me and says, "I figured out what the problem was." What was the problem, you ask? He had leaned the ladder on the wet wall he'd just painted. When I tell you I nearly walked out right then, I'm not exaggerating. Here's the thing. Derek isn't dumb in the traditional sense. He's just chronically overconfident in the dumbest ways possible. Like he has a PhD in making bad ideas sound smart. And it's endearing sometimes. I swear the other night, he spent hours trying to fix my office chair because the wheels kept sticking. When I came in the next morning, the wheels were gone, like completely removed, he said. Now it's stationary. I had to roll it into the office like a sled. Our friends think he's hilarious. They love hearing my Derek stories. His best friend, Matt, even told me I should start a TikTok called Things My Husband Breaks. Honestly, not a bad idea. We'd probably make enough to pay for all the repairs. But lately, I've been realizing that living with him is like living with a golden retriever who just discovered tools. He's full of energy, enthusiasm, and absolute chaos. Last month, I came home early from work and found him trying to reorganize the kitchen. He'd moved all the pots and pans into the laundry room because, quote, it's closer to the sink. I stood there for a full minute, just trying to process the logic. When I asked why, he said, "It makes sense in theory." In what theory, Derek? Still, As much as I want to strangle him half the time, he's also the same man who writes me dumb little love notes and leaves them in my coat pockets. The same man who still dances with me in the kitchen when our song comes on. Last night, I came home to find him proudly announcing that he fixed the thermostat. You can guess how that went. He somehow wired it to the doorbell. So now when someone rings, the heat turns off. I just stared at him and he said, "At least now we know when we have guests." I'm genuinely convinced if Derek ever ran for president, the country would collapse in a week. But everyone would be weirdly okay with it because he'd somehow make it sound like a fun experiment. Anyway, I just needed to get this off my chest before I lose my mind. If you're reading this and your partner is the type of person who triple checks the locks, reads instructions before assembling IKEA furniture, or doesn't start projects they can't finish, hold them close, cherish them. Because I'm out here living with a man who once tried to fix a leaky faucet with chewing gum, and somehow I still love him. God help me, I still love him, so I didn't think I'd be back with an update, but my husband has outdone himself once again. The internet loved him, like way more than I expected. Half of you said Derek should be in a museum under a sign that says, "Man who should not be left unsupervised with tools." The other half said you wanted to marry him. Well, let me tell you, if anyone out there still wants him, I'll even throw in the ladder that tried to kill him. Anyway, life's been relatively calm for the past few weeks. I thought maybe Derek had learned his lesson after the great thermostat debacle. Yes, it's still wired to the doorbell. The HVAC guy basically gave up and said, "I'm afraid to touch it." But no, calm was merely the eye of the storm. Last weekend, Derek decided to help out around the house, always a dangerous phrase. I was upstairs working, and I heard him in the garage humming away. After about an hour, I hear this loud pop and then a string of creative curses. I run down there, and the smell of gasoline hits me in the face. He's standing there, covered in what looks like an oil slick. Holding a garden hose with a hole in it, he says, "Don't panic." But I may have discovered something about how gas cans work. I said, "Derek, why is there gasoline on the floor?" Apparently, and I swear I can't make this up, he was transferring gas from one container to another using a garden hose. Because siphoning looked easy on YouTube, only he didn't account for gravity or common sense. So now our garage smells like a NASCAR pit stop, and I'm genuinely afraid to turn on the lights. When I told him this was how people blow up their houses, he said, "That's why I left the door open for ventilation." The garage door was open. Yes. But so was the kitchen door. We had a cross breeze of pure gasoline air blowing through our entire house. I had to call the fire department just to make sure we weren't about to spontaneously combust. The firefighters showed up, and one of them, this big, bearded guy named Jake, looked around, sniffed the air, and just said, "Sir, what exactly were you trying to accomplish here?" And Derek, with the confidence of a man who has never once read a warning label, said, "Efficiency." Jake looked at me and said, "Ma'am, good luck," before leaving. But wait, it doesn't end there. 2 nights later, I'm in bed, finally reading, and I hear Derek in the bathroom muttering to himself, then a thump, then, "Oh no. Oh no, no, no." He walks out pale as a ghost, holding the toilet seat. He broke the toilet seat in half, apparently. He thought he could fix the loose hinge by tightening the screws with a drill. A power drill. He split the entire plastic frame. He looked genuinely shocked when I asked why he didn't just use a screwdriver. His answer? Because I wanted to make sure it was tight enough. The man stripped the screws and destroyed the hinge. So now we're using the guest bathroom until I can buy a replacement. Oh, and to top it all off, he also tried to help me meal prep by washing the produce in the dishwasher. Because he read somewhere that restaurants do it for efficiency, I came home to a load of lettuce and tomatoes bouncing around next to our coffee mugs. When I pointed out that the lettuce was literally melted, he said, "Okay, maybe not on the heat cycle next time." Next time, I swear to God, my husband has 9 lives. Now, I know this all sounds like I'm roasting him, and I kind of am. But to be fair, he's also been trying really hard to make up for all the chaos. Last night, he surprised me with a candlelit dinner. He made steak and mashed potatoes. The steak was, well, a little crispy. But I didn't say anything because the man looked so proud. And when I asked where he got the fancy plates, he said, "Oh, I found them in the attic. We don't have plates in the attic." He found my grandmother's antique china that I'd boxed up for safekeeping. He just thought they were dusty extras. I almost cried, not from anger, but because he had no idea they were worth more than our car. So yeah, I'm living with a man who will literally destroy a toilet, risk setting the house on fire, and accidentally serve dinner on family heirlooms, but who still looks at me with that same goofy smile that makes it hard to stay mad. Tonight, he came up behind me while I was brushing my teeth, wrapped his arms around me and said, "You know, you're really patient with me. You must love me a lot, and I do. God help me, I do. But I'm also buying a fire extinguisher for every room in this house. Okay, read it? This is probably going to be my last update. Mostly because I don't think my heart, marriage, or homeowner's insurance can survive another round of Derek's experiments." After my last post went viral, a friend actually sent it to me not realizing it was me. She said, "You have to read this. This guy sounds exactly like your husband." I nearly choked on my coffee. Anyway, since then, life has been eventful in ways that are so absurd. I'm starting to believe the universe has Derek in a special simulation designed for chaos. First off, the garage incident. Yeah, it got worse before it got better. Even though we aired the house out for days, the smell lingered. We had to replace the drywall and repaint because Derek thought lighting a few candles would help absorb the fumes. You can see where this is going? It didn't cause a fire, but it did set off every smoke alarm in the house and melt one of my candle holders. He said, "Well, at least it smells better now. Like vanilla gasoline." He's so lucky he's cute. Then came the great sprinkler catastrophe. It was a Sunday morning. Peaceful, coffee brewing, birds singing. I hear Derek outside messing with the sprinklers. I think, oh, he's being productive, great. 30 minutes later, I hear a strange hissing noise followed by a geyser sound. I walk outside to find my husband standing ankle-deep in a muddy crater, holding a snapped-off sprinkler head, water shooting straight into the air like Old Faithful. He looks at me, drenched, hair plastered to his forehead, and says, "I think I found the problem." He had borrowed a wrench from his friend Kyle, and apparently, instead of gently unscrewing the sprinkler head, he just yanked it off. Then he panicked, tried to shove it back on, and ended up flooding half the yard. The water pressure was so high it pushed the garden gnomes into the street. I had to call Mr. Henderson, our poor 80-year-old neighbor, to help us find the shutoff valve. Derek's solution? We could just let it run out, as if we lived on top of an infinite water supply. Once that was fixed, after a $300 plumbing bill, I figured we'd get a break. I even told him, maybe just don't fix anything for a while. Watch TV, do something safe. That lasted exactly 3 days. Because then Derek decided he wanted to surprise me by reorganizing the pantry, which in theory is great, except he took everything out, didn't label a single container, and then rearranged it in what I can only describe as chaos theory. I opened the pantry to find sugar in a Tupperware labeled rice, flour in a coffee can, and dog treats in a mason jar marked snacks. When I asked where the actual snacks were, he said, "Oh, I might have mixed them up, but they're all edible." He learned that day that bacon strips do not, in fact, taste like bacon. But, and here's where I need to give him some credit, Derek's been trying, really trying. After seeing how stressed I got about everything, he started therapy. His therapist apparently told him to write down his ideas before acting on them, and then wait 24 hours before doing anything involving tools, electricity, or the kitchen, and it's kind of working. He even made me breakfast last weekend without setting anything on fire. The eggs were overcooked, the toast was charcoal, and the coffee tasted like battery acid. But it was made with love, and I didn't have to replace an appliance afterward, which feels like progress. We've started laughing about it more now. I told him I was going to start a Derek damage fund, a little jar for every time something breaks. He said, "That's fine, as long as I get naming rights to the jar." He named it the Museum of Oops. But the real kicker, the part that made me stop and actually tear up, happened last week. We had a small dinner with some friends, and one of them joked, "Man, Derek, your wife's a saint for putting up with you." And Derek smiled, took my hand and said, "She doesn't just put up with me. She believes in me when I'm dumb enough to think I can fix things." That's what love looks like, right? You could have heard a pin drop, because for all the chaos and stupidity and burnt dinners and flooded lawns, he's right. Derek may be the dumbest smart man I've ever met, but he's also the kindest, funniest, most well-meaning idiot in existence. He messes up because he wants to help. He breaks things because he believes he can make life easier. He frustrates me because he loves so big that his brain can't always keep up. So yeah, he's the dumbest person alive, but he's my dumb person. And every time I think I can't take one more disaster, he looks at me with those wide, sheepish eyes. And I remember that the world would be a lot duller without him. He still isn't allowed near power tools unsupervised, though. Stories number 12. When a first date turns into a life lesson. I never thought I'd be one of those guys writing about a date gone wrong. But here we are, I'm 44, single again after a long marriage that ended pretty amicably, and trying to navigate the world of dating apps, which frankly feels like walking through a minefield blindfolded. So I matched with this woman named Denise. 42 on Bumble. Her profile was nice, smiling in every picture, good sense of humor. Talked about being family-oriented and loving old-school romance. We messaged for about a week before meeting in person. Our conversations were great. She told me she had 2 adult kids in college, had been divorced twice, and was looking for something real and lasting. Fair enough. I was too. We decided to meet for dinner at this cozy Italian place downtown. The kind with low lights, soft jazz, and wine glasses that look too fragile to touch. She looked even better in person, confident. Well-dressed, put together, the conversation flowed easily. We talked about work. I'm in logistics, she's a nurse manager, travel, and funny dating app horror stories. I was actually thinking, wow, maybe this one's different. Then, somewhere between her second glass of Pinot and my second beer, the conversation shifted. She asked me kind of out of nowhere, "What are you looking for in a relationship?" I told her honestly that I wanted a connection, something real. And yes, physical chemistry mattered to me too. I didn't say it crudely, just in a normal adult way. She nodded thoughtfully, then said, "I should tell you something up front. I've decided I'm celibate until marriage, now." That threw me for a loop. I paused for a second, not because I was judging her choice, but because it was surprising. This was a woman who had been married twice, had 2 grown kids, and had openly talked earlier about her ex-husband's cheating. So I asked gently, "Can I ask what made you decide that?" She explained that after her last divorce, she realized she didn't want to give herself to anyone who wasn't fully committed, that she'd made mistakes in the past by giving too much too soon. And now she was waiting until she found her forever partner. I respected that truly. Everyone's got their own way of protecting their peace. But here's where things got messy. After that conversation, the vibe at the table changed. She kept ordering drinks, expensive ones too, and even suggested dessert. I figured we'd just enjoy the night and call it a friendly outing if it wasn't romantic. But when the bill came, around $180, she sat back, smiled, and said, "You've got this, right?" I hesitated. Normally I don't mind paying on a first date. I've done it plenty of times without thinking twice. But something about the situation rubbed me wrong. The way she'd ordered the most expensive dishes, the pricey wine, and the way she'd subtly positioned herself as someone above casual dating. So I looked at her and said, as politely as I could, "Actually, how about we split it?" Her expression froze. "Excuse me?" I shrugged. "It just feels fair. We had a nice time, but it doesn't really feel like a romantic connection. And I think splitting it makes sense." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Wow, a real man pays for the date. That set something off in me. I wasn't angry, just tired, I said. A real man respects honesty, and I'm being honest that I'm not interested in pursuing something romantic. I respect your choices, but I'm not going to pretend this is going anywhere just to cover a fancy dinner. She scoffed, muttered something under her breath about cheap men, and tossed her card onto the table. We paid, awkwardly, and left. She didn't say goodbye when I got home. I thought about it for a long time. I didn't feel bad for not paying, but part of me wondered if I'd handled it poorly. I called my sister Lauren, who's basically my unofficial therapist. She said, if she's setting her boundaries, you're allowed to set yours too. That stuck with me, because here's the thing. This wasn't about sex. It was about reciprocity, about both people bringing something to the table. If she wanted a traditional courtship where the man pays, that's fine. But traditional courtship also meant mutual interest, emotional connection, and shared values. You can't just pick and choose when to be old-fashioned. A few days later, Denise texted me. She said, "You seemed like a nice guy, but I need a partner who understands my values." "I hope you find what you're looking for," I replied. "You too. I hope you find someone who respects your boundaries and matches your energy." That was the end of it. No hard feelings, just 2 people realizing they weren't compatible. Still, I couldn't help but reflect on the whole encounter. I get that everyone has their past. Maybe she's been hurt deeply. Maybe she's genuinely trying to heal, or maybe she's building walls to protect herself. But part of me thinks she was also testing me, to see how far she could push, how much effort I'd give for a situation that, by her own words, would never be fully reciprocal. I've dated women since then, some great, some not so great, but I've been more aware of my own boundaries. I don't go into a date assuming I'll pay or that someone owes me anything in return. I go in wanting connection, respect, and honesty. And if a first date ends up being a $180 life lesson in emotional maturity, well, that's a price I'm willing to split. After that date, I spent a few days reflecting, not out of regret, but to figure out what I'd actually learned. I realized that, beyond the money issue, the experience highlighted a bigger problem in dating later in life. Mismatched expectations. I met Denise thinking we were looking for the same things. Companionship, connection, maybe a long-term relationship, but in reality, our definitions of what a relationship looked like were completely different. She had this idea that any dating man should fully subsidize her lifestyle on a first date, even when she had explicitly ruled out intimacy until marriage. That's fine if that's what both parties want, but I wasn't on board with that framework. I also started thinking about the way she framed her choices. She repeatedly emphasized her past failed marriages and her adult children, almost like badges of experience that demanded special treatment. I get it. Her life has been complicated. But when someone treats their dating rules as an expectation rather than a mutual agreement, it can feel manipulative. A few friends weighed in as well. My buddy Tom said, "Dude, you did exactly the right thing. Splitting the bill is fair. You're not signing up for a future where you subsidize someone who won't ever be intimate with you. That's just math." And he's right. I realized that I wasn't being stingy or petty. I was respecting both her boundaries and mine. What I didn't anticipate was how much the date stuck with me emotionally. I started second-guessing myself. Was I too blunt? Too judgmental? But then I realized that if I'd agreed to foot the entire bill while feeling uncomfortable, I would have been setting a precedent for being taken advantage of. And that's not the kind of relationship I want. Respect has to go both ways. Not just for the person with the more conservative values or the more expensive tastes. This whole experience also made me reconsider my own approach to dating. I've since been more upfront about my expectations early on. I tell people, I'm looking for a partner who shares my values, and I don't mind splitting a meal unless we both feel a connection worth going further. It's been liberating. It filters out people whose priorities and boundaries are fundamentally incompatible with mine. Another thing that became clear is that dating after 40 isn't about settling or lowering standards. It's about clarity. Denise's date taught me that honesty and boundary setting are more valuable than trying to impress someone, or being impressed by someone's story alone. And yes, the 180 dinner hurt my wallet a little, but the lessons it taught me about self-respect, fairness, and emotional boundaries, priceless. I also started journaling afterward, just to process my feelings without taking them out on anyone else. It helped me separate the emotional frustration from the practical decision-making. By writing things down, I could see that my actions weren't reactive or spiteful. They were deliberate and conscious. That gave me a lot of peace, looking back now. I'm grateful for that date in a weird way. It reinforced the importance of being honest with myself, communicating clearly, and not compromising on my core principles for the sake of someone else's comfort or expectations. If anything, it made me stronger and more confident in navigating the messy world of modern dating. It's been about 6 months since the Denise date, and honestly, it's one of the best lessons I've had in a long time. I didn't realize it at first, but that awkward, overpriced dinner taught me more about self-respect, boundaries, and emotional intelligence than most of my previous relationships combined. Since then, I've approached dating differently. I've been upfront from the beginning about what I'm looking for. Mutual respect, honesty, and shared values. I no longer feel the need to impress anyone with my willingness to pay for a fancy night out. If someone wants to set expectations about money, intimacy, or lifestyle, I consider it carefully. And if it doesn't align with my own boundaries, I move on without guilt. I've gone on a handful of dates since then. Some have been fun, some not so much. But the difference is that I'm no longer compromising my comfort or financial independence to appease someone else's expectations. One woman I went out with even joked about splitting the appetizer, and I laughed and said, "Deal." It felt good, normal. Even no awkward tension, no unspoken judgment. Just two adults figuring it out together. I've also learned not to let someone's personal history intimidate me. Denise had 2 adult children and 2 failed marriages. and she presented her celibacy as a kind of moral or emotional boundary. That's fine, but I realized that past experiences don't automatically earn someone preferential treatment in a relationship. Everyone deserves respect, but no one automatically deserves special privileges just because of their past. Emotionally, I've grown more confident. I don't panic if someone flirts with a date in public or online, because I know that a healthy relationship is built on trust and communication, not control or jealousy. I've learned to communicate clearly, assert my needs, and walk away when things don't align. I also started investing in myself in other ways. I joined a cooking class, started training for a 5K, and even took a weekend photography workshop. Not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I wanted to grow, enjoy life, and build a sense of self-worth that doesn't depend on someone else's approval. Looking back, I don't regret that dinner at all. Denise and I were never going to be compatible, and it's better that I realized it on a single date than after months of misaligned expectations. That night, the bill wasn't just about money. It was a tangible reminder of the importance of fairness, honesty, and boundaries, and walking away with that understanding, priceless. Now, when I go on a date, I feel calm, centered, and confident in my decisions. I know my worth, I respect others, and I don't settle for situations that don't feel right. And while dating can still be messy, awkward, or expensive, I've learned that staying true to myself is far more important than anyone else's opinion of my actions. I'd like to think that Denise is out there finding what she's looking for, and I hope she's happy. As for me, I'm in a place where I don't have to compromise my values for a first impression, a dinner or a story to tell. That night, 180 bought me clarity, and it's been worth every penny. Stories number 13. My 23M boyfriend held me 19F underwater during a bath to prove a point, and I'm still shaken. I don't even know where to start, but I need to get this off my chest, because I feel like my brain is in a constant loop of shock and confusion. My name's Emily, 19, and my boyfriend is Connor, 23. We've been dating for about 8 months, and honestly, until last week, I thought things were mostly normal. He's charming, funny, and at first, incredibly attentive. It started a few months in. Small things that I brushed off. Little bursts of anger over minor disagreements. Or him saying things like, "You'll see I'm right eventually," in a way that made me feel small. I thought maybe it was me being too sensitive last week. We were in the middle of an argument about something trivial. I don't even remember the reason anymore. I only remember the moment. Connor insisted on making a point about trust or control or whatever his justification was, and he grabbed me during a bath. He held me under the water for a few seconds. Long enough for me to panic. I screamed, I flailed, my chest felt like it was collapsing. I don't remember thinking clearly, only that I wanted air, I wanted out, I wanted him to stop. When he finally let go, I scrambled out of the tub, trembling, soaked, and shaking. I remember my heart racing for what felt like hours. He looked at me like I was overreacting. He said something along the lines of, "You didn't get it?" I was just proving my point. His tone was almost calm, like nothing happened, like he'd done me a favor. I stared at him, speechless. My brain refused to accept what had just happened. I left for a friend's house that night. My best friend, Maya, listened while I shook and cried. I couldn't even articulate it at first. The disbelief, the fear, the betrayal. She didn't try to defend Connor. She just held me and told me I wasn't crazy, that what happened was not okay. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept replaying the bath, his hands, his expression. I kept telling myself maybe I imagined it, maybe I misread him, but the bruises on my arm, not huge, but visible. And the sheer terror I felt reminded me that this was very real. Connor called me later, acting like I had misunderstood everything. He said he didn't mean it like that, and that I overreacted. The gaslighting hit me harder than the incident itself. I felt a crushing confusion. Part of me wanted to believe him, because I love him, and part of me knew deep down I could never allow someone to treat me like that. I started reading online, articles about abusive relationships, manipulation, controlling behavior. Everything I was reading made my stomach twist. I kept seeing phrases like intimidation, power and control, violence disguised as a lesson, and that's exactly what I experienced. Connor used fear as a tool to make a point. That's not love, that's abuse. It's been a week, and I've been staying at my mom's place. Jennifer, my mom, is incredible, calm, protective, and terrifyingly practical. She helped me block Connor's number and offered to stay with me until I feel safe. She told me, "Emily, this is not your fault. You're not weak. You're smart for leaving." I've had moments of doubt. A sick, twisted part of me misses him. I miss the good days, the laughs, the small gestures that felt like love. But when I replay that bath, the panic, the helplessness, I realize I can't let nostalgia blind me to what happened. I can't forget the fear. I've contacted a counselor, Dr. Simmons, who specializes in young adult relationships and trauma. I've started journaling everything, the feelings, the incidents, the inconsistencies in Connor's stories. I don't know what's next, but I know I need to reclaim my autonomy. I'm still shaken. My hands shake typing this. My chest tightens when I remember him smiling after he did it. But I am telling myself, repeatedly, that I am not the problem. He is, and love should never, ever leave you gasping for air. I wanted to share this here because I can't talk to anyone else about it. I'm scared some people will judge me for staying with him as long as I did, or for the confusion in my head. But I need to say it out loud. This wasn't my fault. I didn't deserve this. And I'm starting the slow process of realizing that leaving, fully, permanently, is the only way to heal. Even writing this, I can feel the tremors of fear fade just a little, and I hope, one day, I can look back at this and feel strength instead of terror.